Listen, before I tell you this story, I want you to take one slow breath with me. Not to relax, but to prepare. Because what happened in Pernambuco in the last months of 1880 is not the kind of tale you simply hear and move on from. It stays with you, like a shadow under the door, like a voice that was never supposed to speak, finally whispering your name. And I want you to imagine something simple, almost childlike. The sound of bare feet on cold floor, light, careful, barely touching the ground. Feet that learned early in life that silence was safer than breathing. Those were the footsteps of a girl named Íria, 12 years old, skin the color of earth after rain, eyes too big for her face, not because she was frightened, but because she had learned to see what others pretended wasn't there. You have to understand the world she lived in. Pernambuco in 1880 wasn't just a place. It was a wound pretending to heal. Brazil had passed the free wound law 9 years earlier, a law that claimed children of enslaved women would be free. But anyone living in the Northeast back then will tell you, the paper said one thing, and the streets, the plantations, the sugar mills said something entirely different. Children were free, yes, but their freedom had a rope attached to it, a rope held tightly by the same men who owned their parents. And Íria was one of them, a child not enslaved, legally speaking, yet forced to serve in a house that treated her like property inherited with the furniture. Her master, Antonio de Albuquerque, known in the region as Señor Tonico, was a wealthy sugar baron with a reputation that depended entirely on who you asked. To white politicians in Recife, he was a respected patron. To priests, he was a man who donated candles and expected salvation in return. To the enslaved people on his land, he was the storm that never passed. But here's where things become unsettling. Íria, the girl who should have feared him the most, seemed to carry something he could never control. A presence, a silence that felt aware. Some said she saw spirits. Others said she was protected by saints. A few whispered in secret and trembling that she had been born with the ancestors walking beside her. You don't need to believe any of that. Just keep an open mind. Because in the end, even the doubters in that city would be forced to their knees. Now, picture this. December heat pressing down like a hand on the back of your neck. Sugarcane fields shimmering under a sky white with light. And inside the main house of the Albuquerque estate, a silence thick enough to suffocate. Señor Tonico was dying. For 3 days he had been twisting in his bed, feverish, hallucinating, calling for saints he never cared about while alive. Doctors came and left shaking their heads. A priest performed last rites twice, because even he wasn't sure the first one stuck. And the enslaved workers, especially the older ones, kept their distance, not out of respect, but out of the ancient knowledge that when a cruel man dies, the air changes. But Íria didn't avoid him. She watched, not out of cruelty, but with the quiet certainty of someone who had been expecting this moment all her life. Child, one of the house servants whispered to her on the second day, "You shouldn't look at a dying man's face. It calls your spirit." Íria simply blinked, her voice soft. "It's not him calling." No one knew what she meant. Not yet. On the fourth night, Tonico's agony worsened. His lungs rattled like coals rolling in a metal pan. The priest sat beside him, terrified that the man's last words might reveal truths no church wanted spoken aloud. And outside the bedroom door stood Íria, bare feet, hands clasped, head slightly tilted, as if listening to someone no one else could hear. There's something eerie about a child who doesn't flinch in the face of death. People in the house avoided looking at her. They crossed themselves. Some muttered prayers under their breath. But she stayed there, waiting. And at 3:17 a.m., when Tonico finally exhaled for the last time, something happened that none of the witnesses could explain. Every candle in the room flickered, all at once, as if blown by wind. But the windows were shut. The air was still. The priest froze mid-prayer. The doctor dropped his lantern. And Íria stepped forward. She walked into the master's room, ignoring the shouts, ignoring the hands trying to push her back. She stopped at the foot of the bed and lifted her chin. "Now you see," she whispered. Those 3 words, that tone, that strange calm, people remembered it for decades. Because the moment she spoke them, Tanako's body, lifeless and pale, began to bleed from the nose. Slow, dark, heavy drops sliding down into his beard. The priest almost fainted. The doctor stammered that it was a natural post-mortem reaction. Everyone knew it wasn't. Íria had turned her gaze toward the window. "Let them come," she said. No one understood. Not until the following morning. Not until the bells rang. Not until the city realized what Íria had already known. That Tanako's death was only the beginning, and that by sundown, an entire community would kneel. The sun hadn't risen yet, but the air over the Albuquerque estate felt altered. People would later describe it the same way, as if the world had woken up holding its breath. At dawn, the bell of the small chapel near the sugar mill began ringing by itself, not wildly, not chaotically, just one slow toll, then another, then another. The sound carried across the fields, rolling through cane stalks, reaching the workers' quarters, echoing into the city of Escada, like a warning someone had ignored for too long. And that was when the rumors began. They say the master bled after death. They say the candles died and came back all at once. They say the girl, you know the one, she was standing there smiling. By mid-morning, every home within walking distance of the estate had heard some twisted version of the night's events. Mothers pulled children close. Elderly men stared at the road, whispering that the world was tipping into a place dangerously close to the supernatural. But Íria moved through the house as if the day were ordinary. She washed the bowl, braided her hair, stood at the doorway watching the sky lighten. She didn't seek attention, and yet everyone's eyes found her. The priest refused to return to the room where Tanako's body lay. He kept repeating the same words, hands shaking. She looked through me as if she wasn't seeing me, but someone standing behind me. Meanwhile, the widow, Dona Celeste, sat in the corner of the parlor, too stunned to cry. She was a pale, quiet woman, the kind whose silence had always made people think she agreed with everything her husband did. But no one really knew her, not even Tanako. And that morning, she watched Íria with a kind of fearful fascination, as if she were seeing the girl for the first time. The house servants whispered that Tanako's soul hadn't left the property, that it was pacing, furious, confused, that the night birds refusing to sing were proof enough. Around 10 o'clock, a group of local officials arrived for the obligatory inspection. Though slavery was still legal, the government was increasingly sensitive to anything that looked like rebellion or collective disturbance. The men entered with clipboards, stiff collars, and misplaced arrogance. The lead inspector, a man with a mustache like a misplaced broom and a voice too loud for the humidity of the room, asked the servants the same questions on repeat. What did you see? What did the girl do? Who else was in the room? But no one had a clear answer. Every detail twisted between fear, superstition, and memory. Then the inspector made a mistake. A foolish one. The kind arrogant men make when they think the world works the way they were promised it would. He summoned Íria. She walked in slowly, her feet barely making sound on the wooden floor. She didn't look nervous. If anything, she seemed older than she was, wiser. The kind of child who observed the world like she already lived two lives before this one. Girl, the inspector said, as if the word itself were an insult. Tell us what you did during the master's final moments. Íria looked at him calmly. I waited. For what? He snapped. For him to see. The inspector frowned. See what? She met his eyes with unsettling steadiness, the ones he pretended weren't real. A chill slipped across the room. One of the officials crossed himself. Another scribbled something pointless on paper. The inspector's voice cracked in irritation. We're not here to listen to childish superstition. Be serious. Íria tilted her head slightly, the same quiet gesture she'd made the night Tanako died. Ask him, she said softly. Ask him. The dead man. The inspector slammed his folder down on the table. Enough. But the room felt different now. Thicker, heavier, as if Íria's words had pulled something forward. Some presence, some memory, something that refused to stay buried. While the officials argued among themselves, The estate workers began gathering outside the house, forming small circles, whispering in Yoruba, Kikongo, and Kimbundu, old prayers, old protection chants. Something was unfolding, and they felt it in their bones. Just after noon, the city's undertaker finally arrived with 2 assistants. They carried wooden boards, measuring ropes, and cloths to prepare Tanako's body for burial. But when they tried to lift him, one assistant gagged and stumbled back. The cloth around Tanako's head was soaked through, not with fresh blood, but with something darker, thicker, almost black. Something that shouldn't have been flowing from a dead man more than 12 hours after death. The undertaker, who had seen every kind of body imaginable, backed away slowly. "This is not normal," he murmured. "He should be dry. Completely dry. This looks like..." He stopped himself, because the last thing he wanted was to say the word punishment. And Íria, standing in the doorway, whispered, "It's not done yet." Her voice was so soft the undertaker almost believed he imagined it. But the widow heard, and something inside her broke open. "What do you know?" she asked, standing up with surprising force. Her voice trembled, not with anger, but with desperation. Íria didn't answer immediately. Instead, she stepped into the room, walked past the officials, past the priest, past the undertaker, and stopped beside the bed. She placed her hand, small, fragile, unthreatening, on the wooden frame, and the candles flickered again, the same way they had during Tanako's final breath. Even the air shifted. Then Íria spoke. He owed too many souls. The widow collapsed into a chair, covering her mouth. The officials exchanged terrified glances. The priest whispered a prayer that tripped over itself. And the inspector? His arrogance crumbled. "Girl," he whispered, "what are you saying?" Íria finally looked at him. Truly looked at him, with an expression that shouldn't belong to a 12-year-old. "I'm not saying," she answered. "I'm only repeating what they told me." "Who?" he breathed. Íria blinked, and for the first time, a shadow crossed her face that made even the toughest men in that room stiffen. The ones he thought he killed. No one moved. No one breathed. It was the kind of silence that wraps around the spine and squeezes. A moment later, the front door burst open. A crowd from the city was arriving. Workers, neighbors, curious townspeople, even children, all demanding to see Tanako's body, all whispering Íria's name as if she had become part warning, part prophecy. The inspector tried to regain control, shouting orders, waving his papers, insisting that everything was under authority. But authority was no longer in the room. Something else was. Something that had been waiting years for a moment like this. And Íria simply stood there, hands clasped loosely in front of her, watching the city gather like witnesses to a storm they didn't yet understand. A storm that was only beginning. By late afternoon, the road leading to the Albuquerque estate looked like a pilgrimage route. Men still wearing the dust of the sugar fields. Women holding rosaries tight enough to leave marks on their fingers. Elders walking slowly, leaning on staffs carved long before any of them were born. But everyone carried the same expression, a mixture of curiosity, fear, and something else, something that looked alarmingly like hope. Because here was a truth no one dared say aloud. Tanako's reign had shaped that region for decades, but not through admiration. He ruled through hunger, debt, humiliation, and a cruelty so consistent it became predictable. And predictable cruelty is the worst kind, because the oppressed learn to organize their suffering around it. Now he was gone, but people didn't trust it. Not until they saw him with their own eyes. The inspector tried to stop the crowd from entering. "This is an official investigation," he shouted, waving his hands as if he could push back hundreds of people with his voice alone. No one listened. They flowed around him like water around a stone. Not forcefully, not violently, just inevitably. Even the police sent from Escada stood aside. They weren't paid enough to stand between a grieving, furious community and the dead body of the man who had tormented so many. Inside the house, Tanako's corpse had grown heavier, darker, and somehow more unsettling. The undertaker refused to touch him again unless someone else stayed in the room with him. The widow sat with her hands clenched in her skirt, pale as wax. But Íria, she stood near the doorway, as if waiting for someone to arrive. When the first townspeople entered the room, the air tightened. Some gasped, some spat on the floor, some simply stared, their faces unmoving but their eyes burning with so many years of swallowed pain. Then something unexpected happened. An old woman approached the bed, skin wrinkled like dried leaves, eyes sharp and aware. A former enslaved woman who had lived on that estate long before Tanako inherited it. She didn't cry. She didn't tremble. She just placed her hand on the edge of the bed and murmured in Yoruba, "Ewa untold ti lo on the Sinsenyi." Those who left are here now. Every hair on the necks of the officials rose. Íria stepped forward. The old woman saw her, really saw her, and suddenly she knelt, not out of fear, not out of submission, but in recognition. The room held its breath. Then the old woman whispered words that were carried from mouth to mouth across the crowd. She's not alone in her body. A wave of shock rolled through the house. People crossed themselves. Others whispered prayers their grandparents had taught them. Some backed away. Some leaned forward. The inspector, flustered and sweating, shouted, "Stop spreading nonsense." She's a child. But the old woman didn't even look at him. She kept her eyes on Íria. "You hear them, don't you?" she said. Íria nodded once. "Since when?" the old woman asked. Íria took her time answering. She looked down at her own hands, as if counting memories by the scars. "Since I was 5, she said softly, "when I first saw him push a man into the fire pit." A small cry escaped from someone in the crowd. Tanako's cruelty wasn't a rumor. It was a memory that lived inside dozens of people who now stood shoulder to shoulder in that suffocating room. "And what do they want now?" the old woman asked. Íria lifted her chin. "They want him to be seen." A murmur spread to the crowd, a ripple of discomfort mixed with anticipation. Someone in the back whispered, "She means the ancestors." Another replied, "She means the dead he forced to die before their time." The priest tried to interrupt. "This is blasphemy. We cannot encourage." But his voice faded the moment Tanako's body shifted. Not much, just a tiny movement of the jaw, slack and heavy, a small spasm of the neck. But it was enough to send a blast of whispers through the room. The undertaker stepped back so fast he hit the wall. "It's just gas," he stammered. It's normal." No one believed him. The widow began to sob in a quiet, fractured way, as if the sound had to force itself past years of silence. Íria approached the bed, not close enough to touch the body, but close enough to be noticed. For a moment, the entire house seemed to tilt toward her, as if the walls, the furniture, even the dust in the air were listening. "You didn't fear him, did you?" the inspector asked suddenly, his voice trembling despite his attempt to sound authoritative. Íria looked at him. "No," she said. "He feared me." The room erupted, not in noise, in silence, so complete it felt like pressure. The inspector's face drained of color. He opened his mouth, but no sound emerged. Íria took a slow step forward. "Not me," she added. "The ones behind me." A woman in the crowd fainted. Someone caught her before she hit the floor. The priest whispered a prayer under his breath, so fast it sounded like gibberish. And then a sound rose from the hallway. A low, steady rumble, dozens of feet kneeling. People were kneeling. First the older women, then the men, then the teenagers who had grown up hearing stories of this house, as if it were a curse. One by one, like falling dominoes, they knelt facing Íria. The inspector shouted for them to stop, but he might as well have shouted at the ocean, because this wasn't obedience. This wasn't fear. This was recognition. Recognition of something ancient, something powerful, something the plantation had tried to bury for generations. Íria stood with her hands at her sides, the afternoon light cutting across her face through the half-open window. And for the first time, her voice carried authority, not childish, not forced, but inevitable. He won't rest until everything he had comes out. And today it begins. A shiver spread across the crowd. The widow cried harder. The undertaker dropped his tools. And the inspector, whose entire worldview relied on belief that the powerful were untouchable, whispered helplessly. What did he hide? Íria turned her gaze toward the back of the house. toward the sugar fields, toward the old well, toward the place where Tanako always forbade anyone to walk. She raised her finger and pointed. "There," she said. "Start digging." The room exploded into movement. Men and women rushed outside. The police, overwhelmed, backed away rather than intervene. Some grabbed shovels. Others used their bare hands. And Íria remained at the doorway watching them. Calm, still, certain, as if she already knew exactly what they would find buried beneath the earth. The ground behind the Albuquerque estate had always felt wrong. Not cursed, not exactly, but heavy, as if each step pressed into memories that didn't belong to the living. Even the sugarcane grew differently there, taller in some places, stunted in others, bending in the wrong direction when the wind blew. Tanako never allowed anyone to work that part of the land. He claimed the soil was unpredictable, that the land was unstable, that people could fall into hidden holes. But the enslaved workers knew better. They had whispered about that place for decades, about screams swallowed by the night, about shadows that didn't match the moon, about the way Tanako walked out their lantern, but never with a companion. Now, for the first time, the land was no longer off limits. Dozens of hands, calloused, furious, trembling, clawed at the earth. Some used shovels, some used broken pieces of wood, some simply dug with their bare fingers, as if digging into the past itself. Íria stood at the porch, her posture impossibly calm for a child. She looked like someone standing at the edge of a cliff, listening for an echo only she could hear. The inspector tried to stop the digging several times, each attempt weaker than the last. "You don't know what's buried there," he shouted. A man answered without pausing his digging. "We know enough. That's why we're still alive." Another woman spat in the dirt. Her hands shook with rage. "My brother disappeared out here," she said. "Told my mother he'd be back before sunset. We never saw him again." Someone else murmured, "My uncle too." Then another voice, "My son." Another, "My father." The inspector closed his mouth. For the first time, he realized the magnitude of what was happening. Just before sunset, someone gasped. The digging stopped for a heartbeat. Then a voice cracked through the silence. "Here, something here." People rushed to the spot. Men dropped to their knees. Women pushed forward, clutching each other's arms. Someone brushed away more dirt, and then they saw it. A wooden beam, rotted, heavy, buried deep enough that it took 3 grown men to expose the top of it. And beneath that beam, a hollow, a pit, an old well. But it was not a well anymore. It was a grave. No, not a grave. Graves. Multiple. Layered. Bones, small objects, torn cloth, rusted shackles, broken rosaries, fragments of sandals. The remains were tangled together, as if their final moments had been desperate and violent. A woman screamed, not out of fear, out of recognition. She lunged toward the pit, reaching for a small cloth doll half buried in the corner. Her fingers closed around it, and her whole body collapsed inward. "This was hers," she whispered. "My daughter, this was hers." Someone caught her before she fainted. The inspector staggered back, his legs trembling under the weight of truth. His eyes darted to Íria, then to the crowd, then back to the pit, as if the world were rearranging itself faster than he could understand. The undertaker, who had finally stepped outside to get air, saw the pit and froze. "Oh, dear God," he whispered. "This is not one man's crime. This is a field of souls." And Íria, she stepped forward slowly, her bare feet silent on the ground. People parted for her, without thinking. A path opened. She stopped at the edge of the pit and looked inside. Her expression didn't change. No shock, no fear, no triumph, just recognition. Deep, old recognition. "These were the ones who called me," she said. "They've been calling for a very long time." Someone in the crowd sobbed. Someone else dropped to their knees. The priest tried to speak, but his voice cracked. How did you know?" he whispered. Íria didn't answer immediately. She placed her palm on the wooden beam, feeling the texture of decay beneath her fingers. "They show me things," she finally said. "When the night is quiet, When the wind stops, when everyone else is asleep, the old woman from earlier stepped closer, her breath unsteady. "They chose you," she murmured. "You're a vessel." Íria nodded once, only because I listened. At that moment, the setting sun broke through the clouds and hit the pit directly, illuminating the bones with a glow that looked almost golden. A collective gasp filled the air. It wasn't a miracle. It wasn't divine light. It was exposure. Exposure of truth. Exposure of decades of silence. Exposure of the weight Tanaco had carried and buried under that soil. The widow, who had followed the crowd outside, saw the pit and crumbled. Her knees hit the ground with a soft thud. She covered her mouth with both hands, tears streaming silently. She whispered something no one expected. He told me no one would ever find them. He said the earth obeyed him." Íria turned to her gently. "The earth heard every cry they made," she said, "and it never forgot." As the last light of day dimmed, the inspector realized something with a kind of terror he couldn't hide. This wasn't just a discovery. This was a revelation, a reckoning. And Íria, a 12-year-old girl, was at its center. The priest approached her cautiously. "What happens now?" he asked. Íria took one slow breath. The kind of breath you take before speaking a truth that will change everything. "They're not finished," she said. "Tonight, they won't be named." The crowd stiffened. The evening air grew colder. "What do you mean?" the inspector asked. Íria looked toward the house, toward Tanaco's body, toward the people gathering like witnesses to a trial no one had prepared for. "They will speak for me," Íria said simply, "and the city will listen." A shiver crept through the group. The old woman whispered, "Tonight, the dead will have their voices back." Night arrived earlier than usual, as if the sky itself wanted to witness what was coming. The moment the sun vanished, the air took on a strange density, heavier, thicker, almost metallic. People later swore that even the insects stopped singing, as if nature didn't dare interrupt what the dead were preparing to reveal. Torches and lanterns illuminated the yard in trembling circles of gold. Shadows stretched unnaturally long across the ground, bending and twisting with the wind. The pit, where the bones lay partially uncovered, seemed darker than the rest of the land. Not empty, no, never empty. It felt occupied. The crowd gathered again, drawn not by curiosity anymore, but by responsibility. If the dead wanted to speak, the living had to listen. Someone helped the widow walk outside. Her softness, once overlooked, now felt like an exposed wound. She stared at the pit as if it could swallow her whole, but she refused to look away. Maybe she feared what her silence had allowed. Maybe she finally understood that fear and complicity were the same mask. The priest stood near the porch clutching a large wooden cross, his knuckles white, his eyes flickering between terror and faith. The inspector, on the other hand, looked like a man whose world had been ripped apart and rearranged in a language he didn't understand. And Íria stepped forward with the stillness of someone who had always known this night would come. Her small frame cast a long shadow behind her. Her hair, lit by firelight, seemed to shimmer with an otherworldly glow. She didn't rush. She didn't hesitate. She simply walked to the edge of the pit and placed her bare feet on the cold soil. The crowd fell silent instantly. Íria raised her chin, as if listening to something just beyond human hearing. Then she whispered, "They're ready." A chill rippled through the yard. The old woman who had recognized Íria earlier stepped forward, trembling. "Child, do you mean to let them speak through you?" Íria didn't turn her head. She didn't blink. She answered softly, "It's the only way they'll be heard. It's the only way they'll let him rest." Behind them, in the main house, Tanaco's corpse lay alone in the candlelit room. Every flame flickered violently, as if agitated by a storm sealed indoors. Some claimed later they saw shadows moving along the walls, circling the bed like restless silhouettes. The inspector swallowed hard. "What do you mean, rest?" "He's dead." Íria finally looked at him. "No," she said. "He's not where it matters." A woman sobbed. Someone dropped their rosary. The priest clutched his cross tighter. Íria took a deep breath. the kind that seemed far too heavy for a 12-year-old chest, and placed her hand over her heart. "For every name they say," she whispered, "you must repeat aloud." The inspector frowned. "Why?" "So the world won't forget them again." No one argued after that. Íria closed her eyes, and when she spoke again, her voice was not her own. "João dos Anjos." The name cut through the air like a blade. A man in the crowd gasped loudly and fell to his knees. "That was my brother," he whispered, trembling. Íria's body swayed slightly, as if buffeted by a breeze no one else could feel. Rosa de Ketu. An elderly woman let out a cry, so raw it silenced even the wind. "That was my mother, my mother," Íria continued, her voice shifting, slipping into tones, accents, rhythms that didn't belong to her age or her lifetime. "Benedito, son of Aruanda. Isabel Mora, taken at dawn. Calu, burned for refusing to kneel. Marinha de Luz, drowned in the well." Each name landed like a stone in the pit of everyone's stomach. With each name, people echoed it back, sometimes shouting, sometimes whispering, sometimes crying so hard the words broke into pieces. The priest dropped to his knees. The inspector covered his face with both hands. The widow sobbed so violently she shook, guilt pouring out of her in sound. Íria's breathing grew uneven. Sweat formed on her forehead. Her small hands clenched into fists. It was too much, the weight of dozens of souls pressing to a single fragile body. "Enough," the inspector choked out. "She's a child. She can't." But Íria's voice surged again, louder, resonating in her ribs. "They cannot be silent." The ground trembled, just slightly, but enough for everyone to feel it. Íria's voice lowered into something that felt ancient, not just old, but sacred. "They died unknown. They died erased. Tonight they return." The crowd wept openly now. Some bowed, some covered their faces, some held on to each other. Íria raised her arm and pointed toward the house, toward the room where Tanako's corpse lay. "And he will not pass through the veil," she said, "until every name he buried speaks." The widow's sobs broke into a helpless wail. The priest clutched his cross to his chest. In the pit, the torchlight reflected off the bones, giving them the eerie impression of movement, almost like acknowledgement. Íria inhaled sharply, as if a cold hand had touched her spine. Another name tore from her throat. "Vicente do Ingenio Novo." A woman screamed, "My father, my father." Íria staggered, nearly falling. The old woman rushed to her side, but Íria held up a hand, commanding stillness with the strength of someone guided by something greater. And then the wind shifted. A sudden gust swept across the yard, extinguishing half the torches. Darkness spilled into the open space like a wave. People gasped. Someone shouted a prayer. The inspector grabbed the nearest lantern and held it up to the sky. But Íria didn't flinch. She turned her head toward the house, her eyes half-lidded, and whispered, "He is coming." The crowd froze. "Who?" the priest whispered. Íria opened her eyes slowly, and for a fraction of a second, they didn't look human. They looked ancient, deep, carrying the reflection of something no child should ever have to see. "The one he fears," she said. A ripple of terror passed through the crowd. The priest backed away. The inspectors exchanged horrified glances. The widow covered her ears, shaking violently. The torches flickered back to life one by one, igniting as if touched by invisible hands. Íria lifted her face to the night sky, and then, with a voice that cut through the darkness like a bell, "Tonight, the city will kneel." No one dared move. No one dared speak. And in the house behind them, Tanako's corpse, untouched, unmoved, began to bleed again. Vou seguir exatamente do pano MK Parmos, mantendo o mesmo tom emotional, spiritual e cinematográfico. Let me ask you something. If you were standing there in that yard with the earth still open and the bones still shining under trembling fire, and a 12-year-old girl told you, "Tonight, the city will kneel," what would you do? Laugh? Run? Pray? Most of them did all three, just in different orders. The crowd was split between terror and something harder to admit. an almost desperate desire for justice. Not the kind written on paper by men who never saw the inside of a sugar mill, but the kind that rises from the ground, carried by voices that refuse to stay buried. From inside the house, a scream ripped through the night. Not a child's scream, not a woman's, a grown man's voice. Raw, cracked, terrified, but there were no living grown men in that room. People turned toward the house as one body. Some stepped back, some inched forward. The inspector, white-knuckled and shaking, grabbed the nearest policeman by the arm. "Did you leave anyone with the corpse?" he asked. The officer shook his head, eyes wide. "No, senor. The room was locked." Another scream echoed, this time muffled, as if coming from beneath water. The widow gasped and clutched her chest. "The door," she whispered. "He locked it from the outside. No one should be there." The priest made the sign of the cross so fast he nearly dropped it. Íria didn't move. She simply turned her head slowly toward the house. Her expression changed, not to fear, but to recognition, as if the sound was a line from a story she'd already heard many times in the dark, whispered across worlds. "He's not alone anymore," she murmured. The inspector swallowed hard. "What does that mean?" Íria tilted her head, listening. "The one he fears has found him." The old woman beside her whispered, half in awe, half in dread. "Exu, guardian of paths. The gatekeeper stands where doors were supposed to stay closed." You don't have to believe in entities, in guardians, in spirits with names older than the empire itself. But you do need to understand this. On that night, no one doubted that something had entered that room. The inspector moved first. Maybe it was duty, maybe pride, maybe the terror of losing control. He gestured to two policemen. "Come with me," he ordered, though his voice wasn't as steady as he wanted it to be. They climbed the steps and disappeared into the house. The crowd held its breath. Even the torches seemed to burn quieter. Íria watched them go, then looked back to the pit. "They're watching," she said softly. "Who?" a young boy asked beside her, his voice trembling. "The ones who waited too long for this night," she replied. Inside the house, boots thudded down the hallway. The inspector reached Tanako's room, fumbled with a key, and forced the door open. A cold gust of air rushed past him, outward, as if the room had been holding a breath of its own. He stepped in and stopped. Tanako's body was no longer lying straight. His head was turned to the side, mouth half open, eyes wide. Blood had dried around his nose and ears, yes, but something else had changed. His chest. It was bare. His shirt had been ripped open by something. Finger-like marks streaked across his skin, leaving violet bruises, as if someone had pressed down with furious, invisible hands. And carved into the skin, not deep enough to kill, but too precise to be random, were lines. Not letters, not words, marks. The inspector leaned closer, lantern trembling in his hand. They weren't marks. They were numbers. One line, then another, stacked, counted, hundreds of them, the way someone counts debts, or lashes, or lives. One of the policemen gagged and backed away. "Who did this?" he whispered. The inspector stared, his mouth dry. He knew, and he didn't know, both at once. He turned around slowly. Íria was standing in the doorway. No one saw her enter. No one heard her climb the stairs. But there she was, bare feet, steady gaze, hands hanging loosely at her sides. "This is his account," she said quietly. "They've written it on his skin so no one could say they didn't see." The inspector shook his head. "You expect me to believe the dead did this? That the dead count their pain on the body of the man who hurt them?" Íria's eyes flashed, not with anger, but with something older than anger. "I don't expect you to believe," she replied. "I expect you to witness." For a second, the inspector looked like a little boy lost in a dark church, realizing the statues might be watching him. He lowered his lantern. "What do they want?" he whispered. Íria stepped inside, stopping beside the bed. The room smelled of sweat, candle wax, and something metallic and sour that made the air feel heavier. "They want the city to know what this body cost," she said. "They want every step he took to be measured, every life he broke to be counted. every scream he buried to be spoken. She turned to him. "And they want you to carry it." "Carry what?" he asked. "The truth." Down in the yard, people waited for news. The light from the open door spilled out onto the balcony, long and thin like a tongue of fire. The old woman closed her eyes and murmured prayers in Yoruba. The widow rocked back and forth, whispering, "Wasn't supposed to be like this, wasn't supposed to be like this." The priest tried to begin a hymn, but the words died in his throat. Suddenly, Íria's voice rang out from the balcony. "Bring them up." The crowd looked up. She stood against the night sky, small yet impossibly present, a silhouette with fire behind her eyes. The inspector stepped out behind her, shaken, pale, his hands still trembling. He gestured to the policeman. "Bring the body," he ordered. The men looked at each other, horrified. "You want us to carry him outside?" "It's not a request," the inspector snapped, but even his anger sounded frightened. They obeyed. Moments later, Tanako's body was brought out to the balcony for all to see. The crowd fell into a silence, so deep it felt physical. The torches flickered. Children hid behind their mothers. Men clenched their jaws so hard their teeth ached. From where they stood, they could see the marks carved into Tanako's chest again and again and again. Not elegant, not artistic, just counted. One line for each act of violence, one for each whipping ordered, one for each life broken. No one knew the exact rule, but everyone understood the message. "What is that?" someone asked in a hoarse whisper. Íria stepped forward. Her voice carried across the yard, across the pit, across the bones. "This is the price," she said, "the price of one man's comfort." The inspector swallowed hard. He knew people would talk. He knew the church would be furious. He knew the government would want this buried faster than the bodies in the pit. But he also knew something else. If he tried to cover this up, it would kill him from the inside. Íria looked down at the crowd. "Now listen," she said softly. "I will speak, and you will repeat after me." Her eyes closed. Her small shoulders tensed. When she spoke again, her voice was layered, a child's tone wrapped in something older, deeper, almost echoing. "For everybody in that pit," she said, pointing to the ground, "the city ate bread." The crowd, hesitant but compelled, repeated. "For everybody in that pit, the city ate bread. For every lash on their backs, sugar grew sweeter on your tongues." They echoed, some sobbing, some unable to get the words out. "For every lash on their backs, sugar grew sweeter on your tongues. For every child sold, someone in this town slept better." The words tasted like ash, but they repeated them. They had to. Íria opened her eyes. Her gaze was sharp, unforgiving, but not cruel. "Tonight," she said, "will not kneel to him." She pointed to the corpse. "You will kneel to them." She pointed to the pit. A tremor ran through the crowd. Then, one by one, started with the old woman, people began to fall to their knees. Old men whose backs had never bowed willingly. Women who had held entire families together with their hands. Children who didn't understand everything, but felt the weight of the moment press on their small shoulders. The priest knelt. The inspector hesitated for a long, shaking second. Then he knelt too. The only ones still standing were Íria and Tanako's lifeless body. She looked at him, not with pity, not with hatred, but with a kind of exhausted clarity. "This is what you feared," she whispered. "Not hell, not judgment from above. You feared this, the living finally looking at what you did." She turned to the crowd. "Keep your heads bowed," she said. "They've waited too long for this." And under that Pernambuco night sky, with torches burning low and the earth still open, an entire city, for the first time, knelt not to power, not to money, not to titles, but to the truth. Dawn arrived like a confession, not bright, not warm, but slow, hesitant, as if the sun itself wasn't sure it should rise over a land that had just been forced to face its dead. Most of the crowd had remained through the night. Some slept sitting on the ground, backs against the porch. Others sang old lullabies from Congo and Angola, trying to soothe the spirits they believed still hovered near the pit. A few simply stared at the horizon, waiting for something, anything, that could return the world to a version of normal. But nothing went back to normal. Not after that night. Íria had not moved. She had stood guard over the pit until the first ray of morning light touched the bones. Only then did she sit down, exhaustion pouring into her limbs like sand filling a broken vase. The old woman knelt beside her, gently touching her shoulder. "You carried more than most grown men could bear," she said softly. "You need to rest." Íria shook her head. "They won't let me rest yet." She looked at the ground as though listening to a faint heartbeat beneath the soil. Not until everything is revealed. The inspector, who had not slept either, approached slowly. His uniform was streaked with dust, and his face looked a decade older. He cleared his throat, not out of authority, but out of uncertainty. "Girl, Íria, what exactly do you mean by everything?" Íria's gaze lifted to his face, and though she was just a child, the inspector felt judged, examined, measured in ways he couldn't explain. "There are more," she said simply. The inspector almost dropped his notebook. "More bodies?" "No," Íria said. "More truths." The widow, who had barely spoken through the night, let out a broken sigh. She stood near the porch post, fingers intertwined tightly. "He made me believe I was safe," she whispered. "All these years, I thought silence protected me." Íria turned to her, and her expression softened. For the first time since the night began. "No one is safe when someone chooses cruelty," she said. "You survive by folding yourself. That is not protection. That is survival." Tears streamed down the widow's cheeks. She didn't wipe them away. A rooster crowed somewhere in the distance. Children shifted in their mother's arms. Men stretched their stiff backs and murmured to each other, trying to decide what to do next. And then voices, dozens of voices, coming from the dirt path leading to the estate. People from neighboring plantations, workers from the outskirts of Escada, widows, orphaned children, men missing fingers or toes, women whose eyes carried stories they never got to tell. They walked slowly in clusters, holding tools, lanterns, rosaries. Some came barefoot, some carried baskets of food. All came with purpose. The inspector froze. "We didn't send word," he whispered. "You didn't have to," Íria said. As the new crowd reached the yard, murmurs began to rise. "Is it true?" a man asked. "Did the girl call the dead?" "I heard she made the priest kneel. They say the earth cracked open by itself. They say Tanako's chest is carved like a book of sins." The inspector tried to regain control. "Enough rumors," he shouted, but his voice no longer meant anything. Someone else in the crowd asked a question that cut through all others. "Can she help the ones we lost too?" Íria's shoulders slumped. Not from pride, not from power, from a weight of expectation placed on a child who had not asked for any of this. She stood slowly. The crowd parted, forming a half-circle around her. "I am not a saint," Íria said. "I am not an angel. I am not a witch." She looked down at her hands, small and calloused. "I can only hear because I never stopped listening. The rest is theirs." She gestured toward the pit, toward the bones. Mothers began crying softly. Men lowered their heads. Even the children fell silent. The inspector spoke again, voice quieter this time. "Girl, Íria, the authorities in Recife will come when they hear about this. They won't accept whatever this is." Íria's eyes hardened. They can deny what they want, but they cannot bear it again. A man stepped forward, tall, muscular, with scars across his arms that looked like they belonged to someone who had fought chains and survived. "I worked here when I was a boy," he said. "I remember screams from the backfields, men who went in and didn't come back." Íria nodded. "I heard them too." He stared at her. "How long?" "Always," she whispered. The priest stepped forward, clutching his cross as if it were a lifeline. "This is dangerous," he said. "You challenge the church, the empire. You summon things we do not understand." Íria looked at him gently. "I don't summon them. They were here long before I was born. They waited for someone to speak, because no one else dared to." The priest swallowed hard. "Child, Íria, what do they want now?" The wind shifted, slow and heavy, like a sigh from the earth itself. They want justice, Íria said, and justice begins with truth. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some nodded, some crossed themselves, some clutched their children tighter, and then the old woman raised her voice. Tell us, Menina, what truth comes next? Íria turned toward the house, not the pit, not the crowd, not the inspector. The house, the place where decades of secrets have been sealed behind doors and walls thick with screams. There's a room, Íria said quietly, a room no one enters, a room that was always locked. The widow gasped. Hands flew to her mouth. No, she cried. No, not that room. What room? The inspector demanded. The room behind the master's library. Íria answered, the one with the iron bolt. The crowd stiffened. The inspector frowned. I've never heard of such a room. You wouldn't, Íria said. It wasn't for the living. A man muttered, Meu Deus. Another whispered, I knew it. I always knew. The widow shook uncontrollably. He told me never to ask, she said. He said that room was for discipline. I never opened it. Íria stepped toward her. He never let you, she said softly. But they can. The inspector suddenly pointed toward the house. We're opening it. No, Íria corrected gently, stepping past him. We are revealing it. The crowd followed as Íria led them toward the house like a procession. The inspector walked behind her, lantern trembling in his hand. The priest muttered prayers. The widow dragged her feet as if approaching her own grave. Inside, the air was cold, colder than it had any right to be in a Pernambuco summer. Íria stopped at the back of the library. There, she whispered, a bookshelf. Old, heavy, but something about it felt wrong. The inspector touched one of the shelves, and it moved, not like furniture, like a door. Behind it, an iron bolt glimmered. The inspector's face drained of color. Meu Deus, he breathed, forgetting he wasn't supposed to mix Portuguese with official speech. Íria nodded. Open it. He fumbled with the bolt. It slid loose too easily, and when he pulled the door open, the smell hit them first. Not death, not rot, but despair, thick and old, soaked into the walls. The room was small, dark, floor stained with old marks no soap could ever erase. Chains hung from an iron ring in the ceiling. A wooden board leaned against the wall with metal hooks nailed into it. In the corner, a pile of tattered cloth, children's sizes included. The widow collapsed. The priest dropped his cross. The inspector staggered back and hit the wall. Íria stepped inside. They cried here, she whispered. He laughed here. She touched the chain gently, and they waited for someone to open this door. Someone in the crowd sobbed. Someone else cursed. Someone vomited. Then Íria turned toward the doorway. Her eyes were wet for the first time. They are free now, she said, but the living must decide what comes next. And with that, Pernambuco was no longer just a place. It was a wound, open, undeniable, and finally bleeding where everyone could see it. Word spread faster than fire in dry cane. By mid-morning, every corner of Escada was humming with the same whisper, a whisper everyone repeated, but no one wanted to be the first to claim they'd said it out loud. Tonico had a prison inside his house. The dead spoke. The girl hears them. Some dismissed it as hysteria. Some swore it was divine. Some insisted it was witchcraft. But no one, absolutely no one, pretended nothing had happened. Because no matter what they believed about Íria, the bodies were real. The bones were real. The secret room was real. And for a region built on silence, that reality was enough to set the whole social order trembling. People flooded toward the estate throughout the morning. Not to see Íria, not to see Tonico, not even to see the pit. They came to make sure their own ghosts weren't lying under someone else's soil. Names were shouted. Names were cried. Names were whispered like prayers. Mother Josefa, are you here? Little Manuel, my son. My brother, Joaquim, please, someone tell me if he's one of them. Men searched the bones with trembling fingers. terrified to find what they wanted and terrified not to. Women touched scraps of cloth as if touching the last breath of someone they'd lost decades earlier. Children watched with wide, unblinking eyes. Children who had grown up hearing about monsters, only to discover the monster had been a man with a title, a house, and a smile practiced for church. And in the center of it all stood Íria. She didn't cry. She didn't speak much. She simply watched the yard filled with a grief that felt centuries old. To some, she was an omen. To others, a miracle. To many, she was the bridge between the living and the dead, the voice the empire had tried so hard to silence. As the crowd grew, a small group of men in tailored coats pushed through the entrance of the estate. Judges, police commanders, imperial officials from Recife. They arrived with shiny boots and polished arrogance, expecting to intimidate a frightened community into quiet. But when they saw the bones, their confidence flickered. When they saw the secret room, it trembled. And when they saw Íria, standing alone, small, barefoot, unafraid, something in them broke. The lead magistrate stepped forward, trying to regain control. "This is an illegal gathering," he barked. "The Empire will not tolerate disorder." His words fell dead on the air. Not a single person stepped back. Not one lowered their eyes. The inspector, who had spent the entire night learning fear and humility, walked forward and stood between the magistrate and the crowd. "No one is leaving," he said. The magistrate's face twisted. "And who are you to countermand imperial law?" "A man who saw the truth," the inspector replied, "and I will not bury it." For a brief moment, silence hung sharp as a blade. Then the magistrate stepped toward Íria, towering over her. "You," he said, pointing an accusing finger. "What exactly have you done here, child?" Íria looked up slowly. She didn't step back. She didn't flinch. She didn't tremble. Instead, she spoke with a steady calm that made grown men uneasy. "I didn't do anything," she said. "They did." She pointed to the pit. "The ones your empire forgot." The magistrate scoffed. "Ghost stories. Superstition. You are manipulating these people." Íria held her gaze on him, unbroken, unblinking. "Then go inside," she said. "Touch the chains. Smell the room. Look at the marks on his chest." The magistrate hesitated. Íria folded her arms. "If you think it's all superstition, go stand in the room alone." That question, that challenge, broke whatever Brill authority the officials had left, because none of them moved. Not one. Someone in the crowd shouted, "If he's so brave, let him go." Another voice, "You have orders? Go enforce them in that room. Entail." The magistrate's neck turned red. The empire will not be mocked. Íria tilted her head, a gesture that terrified the inspector the night before. "No one is mocking you," she said calmly. "You're just afraid of what you'll hear if you stand in that room alone." The magistrate took a step back. Just one. Just enough. The crowd saw it. They felt it. And suddenly the fear shifted, not away, but upward, toward those who had always held power. A woman holding a toddler stepped forward, her voice shaking but determined. "My father disappeared in 1872, she said. "Your empire never searched for him. Will you search now?" The magistrate swallowed. "Aye." But another voice interrupted. "My mother vanished the year the drought came. You sent soldiers to punish us for stealing water. You never looked for her." Then another. "My son, 12 years old. They said he ran away. But boys don't run from their mothers. Someone took him." Then another. "My sister, my cousin, my husband, my neighbor." Each accusation slammed into the magistrates like blows. Each voice carried decades of pain the empire had refused to acknowledge. The magistrate raised both hands, trying to calm the rising anger. "This must be handled through official channels," he said weakly. The inspector scoffed. "Official channels buried these people." Íria stepped toward the magistrate. "Do you know why the dead chose last night?" She asked. He didn't answer. She continued. "They waited for the moment the city was tired enough to listen, and tired enough to refuse silence." The magistrate opened his mouth to argue, but then stopped, because something else was happening. Something strange. Something impossible to ignore. The air grew colder. Not a breeze. Not a wind. Cold. Deep. Even. It rolled across the yard like the shadow of something enormous passing overhead. Íria looked toward the house. "They're moving," she said. The magistrate snapped. "What do you mean, moving?" "The dead," Íria said simply. "They are gathering." Someone in the crowd dropped to their knees. Another cried. Another crossed herself repeatedly. The magistrate turned to the inspector, desperate for reason. "This is madness." The inspector shook his head slowly. No, madness was thinking this place had no ghosts. Before the magistrate could reply, a sharp crack echoed from inside the house. The wooden beams groaned. A lantern fell. A window shutter slammed shut with violent force. A tremor rippled beneath everyone's feet, faint but unmistakable. The widow grabbed Íria's arm. "Is it starting again?" she whispered fearfully. Íria closed her eyes. "No," she said softly. "They're asking for something." The magistrate's voice cracked. What do they want?" Íria opened her eyes. Her voice was steady, calm, inevitable. "They want you." The magistrate stumbled back. "Me, and every man who ever helped bury what Tanako did," she said. The crowd erupted into shouts. The policemen looked at each other, terrified. The priest clutched his cross to his chest. The magistrate raised a trembling finger toward Íria. You have no authority." Íria stepped closer. "The dead do." This time, no one dared interrupt. Íria turned toward the pit, her eyes reflecting the pale morning light. "If you want forgiveness," she said to the magistrate without looking at him, "give them what you kept from them." The magistrate's voice cracked. What did we keep?" Íria finally faced him, and for a moment her expression softened. Not with pity, not with cruelty, but with an ancient sadness far older than her 12 years. "The truth," she said, "and today you will..." Silence has a strange weight when it follows fear. Not relief, not calm, just a heavy, pulsing quiet of people realizing that every illusion they lived was collapsing inch by inch. The magistrate stood rigid, face pale, throat bobbing as he swallowed hard. He had come to that estate believing he would simply assert the Empire's will, arrest a few troublemakers, dismiss the hysteria, restore order. But the Empire didn't prepare him for Íria. Was she a prophet? A child traumatized beyond reason? A vessel for something too old to define? He didn't know, but the crowd believed in her more than in him, and belief, he realized, is far more dangerous than rebellion. The inspector stepped forward, arms crossed, his voice rough from the sleepless night. "You heard her," he said to the magistrate. "These people deserve answers you refused to give them for decades." The magistrate's lips trembled. I don't handle missing persons. That's municipal. That's..." A voice interrupted him. "No, it was you." Everyone turned. The widow had stepped forward, her face streaked with dried tears, her spine straight for the first time since her husband's death. "You protected him," she said. "You signed papers so complaints disappeared. You sent soldiers to silence families. You let him bury people because it kept your hands clean." The magistrate's jaw dropped. "That is a lie." But the widow took another step. "You ate at our table," she said. "You prayed in our chapel. You laughed at his jokes while mothers screamed outside these walls." She pointed to the bones. "Now look at what you ignored." The magistrate took a step back, then another. Íria watched him the way one watches a candle about to go out, not with fear, but with certainty. "Tell them," Íria said softly. "Tell them what you signed." "I signed nothing," the magistrate snapped. The crowd hissed in anger. Íria didn't raise her voice. She didn't argue. She didn't accuse. She simply stepped closer and whispered, "They are behind you." The magistrate froze. His breath caught, because it didn't feel like a child's warning. It felt like a fact. Slowly, trembling, he turned. Nothing was there, yet he staggered back, as if someone had stood inches from his face. "It's in your mind," the priest said shakily. He wasn't sure if he meant to reassure the magistrate or himself. Íria lifted her chin. No, they're waiting for him to speak. A sound rose from the crowd, low, rumbling, angry. A man stepped forward, fists clenched. My father vanished in 1874, he said. He worked for your cousin. You told us to accept God's will. He spit at the magistrate's feet. Was this God with two? Another voice rose. My wife disappeared after Tanako accused her of stealing sugar. You ordered her whipped publicly. The next day, she was gone. Then another. You told me my son drowned in the river, but he hated the river. He never went near it. The magistrate shook his head violently. That wasn't me. Those cases, they were handled locally. Stop lying, Íria said gently. Her voice was soft, but the words hit him like stones. You came here at night, she continued. You stood where they're standing now. You took money from him. You said nothing. How do you know that? He whispered. Íria didn't answer with words. She raised her arm and pointed toward the pit. The dead showed me. The magistrate's legs buckled. He dropped to his knees on instinct, whether in terror, guilt, or the weight of the truth pressing down. No one could tell. The inspector exhaled slowly. Finally, a crack in the Empire's armor. The crowd surged closer, forming a circle around the magistrate. Mothers clutched old relics of their lost children. Men tightened their fists, torn between rage and grief. But no one touched him. They waited. For Íria, she approached him slowly, a child walking toward a man who had once held the power to decide who lived and who disappeared. Look at me, Íria said. The magistrate lifted his head. Those eyes, they were not the eyes of a child anymore. They felt full, too full, as if countless lives were standing behind her, speaking through her, watching him. You're going to tell them the truth, she said. I don't know where to begin, he whispered. Íria leaned in so close, he felt her breath on his face. Begin with the night you let Tanako bury the first body. Gasps. The widow covered her mouth. Even the inspector froze. The magistrate's eyes widened, tears gathering. You can't know that. I watched it, Íria said. Through their memories. He broke. Right there, in front of everyone. He crumpled onto his hands, sobbing ugly, shaking sobs of someone who had never cried in public, because men like him believed tears meant vulnerability, and vulnerability meant losing control. Please, he whispered. I can't. You will, Íria said. The inspector stepped closer, voice steady but not unkind. Speak. The magistrate swallowed, chest heaving. He sent for me one night, 1868. He said a worker had attacked him. He wiped his nose, trembling. But when I arrived, the man wasn't breathing. Tanako said it was self-defense. I was young. I believed him. You signed the paper, Íria said. He nodded. I signed it. And the next? The inspector asked. The magistrate sobbed again. Another and another, and then there were families who came to me. They begged, but Tanako said they were dangerous, that they rebelled. The Empire couldn't have unrest. His voice cracked into pieces. I didn't know the pit was so full. Yes, you did, Íria said. You just didn't want to see it. A heavy silence fell. The magistrate pressed his forehead to the ground. What do they want from me? He whispered. The crowd watched Íria. Every breath, every word, every gesture. Íria crouched down beside him. Her voice softened, not to comfort, but to clarify. They want you to name every person you helped disappear. His body tensed. One of the policemen muttered, Meu Deus. The magistrate shook his head desperately. I can't remember them all. There were so many. Íria's eyes glowed with something ancient. Then they will help you remember. A low moan rose from the crowd. A shiver ran through the earth. Torches flickered violently, bending their flames as if pulled by invisible hands. The widow clutched her chest. The inspector stepped back. The priest whispered prayers under his breath. The magistrate cried out, not from pain, but from something else, something internal, as though memories he had buried long ago were being dragged upward, clawing through his chest. He reached for Íria's arm, terrified. Please tell him to stop. Íria didn't move. You stopped their breath, she said. Now they stop your forgetting. He gasped. Sobs tore from him. Names spilled out between cries. Domingos, Rosa, Antonio de Serra, Lil Beata, Marina, Zeta Angola, Elias, Susanna. The crowd answered each name, repeated it, claimed it, cried it, until the pit itself seemed to hum with recognition. Men fell to their knees. Women clutched each other. Children held tightly to their mothers' skirts. And Íria stood taller, like a flame growing upward. When the magistrate collapsed, shaking and hoarse, Íria touched his shoulder. It's enough, she said. He exhaled a sound between a sob and a moan, collapsing sideways. The inspector knelt beside him. Is he dying? Someone asked. No, Íria said softly. Just beginning. The priest raised trembling fingers to his lips. What happens now? Íria looked at the morning sky, streaked with ash-colored clouds. They're not finished, she said. The inspector swallowed. What else do they want? Íria pointed toward the horizon, toward Escada, toward the city center, toward the churches, the marketplace, the governor's office. The city must kneel, she said. All of it. Shivers rippled through the crowd. Every person who lived off their suffering, Íria continued. Every family who closed their doors when screams rose in the night. Every man who benefited from Tonico's hands. They must kneel. The inspector stared at her. To who? Íria stepped closer to the pit. To them, she whispered, and only then would they rest. Like a flame growing upward. When the magistrate collapsed, shaking and hoarse, Íria touched his shoulder. It's enough, she said. He exhaled a sound between a sob and a moan, collapsing sideways. The inspector knelt beside him. Is he dying? Someone asked. No, Íria said softly. Just beginning. The priest raised trembling fingers to his lips. What happens now? Íria looked at the morning sky, streaked with ash-colored clouds. They're not finished, she said. The inspector swallowed. What else do they want? Íria pointed toward the horizon, toward Escada, toward the city center, toward the churches, the marketplace, the governor's office. The city must kneel, she said. All of it. Shivers rippled through the crowd. Every person who lived off their suffering, Íria continued. Every family who closed their doors when screams rose in the night. Every man who benefited from Tonico's hands. They must kneel. The inspector stared at her. To who? Íria stepped closer to the pit. To them, she whispered, and only then would they rest. When Íria said, the city must kneel, something in the air shifted. Not metaphorically, not spiritually, physically. The wind stopped. The birds didn't return. And for one unnerving second, everyone felt as if the sky had leaned closer to hear the rest. The inspector was the first to speak, though his voice trembled like a loose hinge. You mean everyone? The entire city? Íria didn't hesitate. Yes. A man in the crowd rubbed his forehead. Overwhelmed. How are we supposed to force an entire city to do that? Íria turned to him, her expression almost kind. You won't force them. The truth will. The widow let out a weak sigh, folded her arms over her chest as if holding herself together. They'll never listen, she whispered. They'll say we're mad. They'll say this was hysteria. They'll say it's politics or superstition or vengeance. Íria faced her gently. They said the same when your husband buried people alive. Íria answered, and still the truth rose. A murmur rippled through the crowd. By now, people from neighboring villages, Cavallero, Pontezinha, Ribeiro, Eight Palmares, were arriving in clusters. Some had walked for hours barefoot. Some came carrying sacks of maize or cassava, expecting to stay the whole day. Some brought candles. Some brought drums. All of them carried questions. Where is she? Is it true she speaks with the ancestors? My sister disappeared in 1873. Ask her where my sister is. Does she know about the river boy? The one who vanished on the feast day. Íria did not shrink back. If anything, The growing crowd seemed to settle around her, as if she were the central post of a tent, the one thing keeping the fabric of the moment from collapsing. 2 men arrived carrying a makeshift stretcher. The magistrate lay on it, pale, shaking, mumbling the names he confessed earlier. His lips kept forming the same sentence. I didn't want to see. I didn't want to see. The inspector approached Íria, lowering his voice. Men like him, they'll never willingly kneel. The city elites won't either. They'll fight this. They'll call soldiers. They'll call the bishop. They'll call Rio de Janeiro if they need to. Íria looked toward the road leading into Escada. They won't have a choice, she said. The dead are walking. The inspector blinked. What? Íria lifted her hand and pointed, and then they heard it, in the distance, a rumble, not thunder, not carts, not hooves, something else, a sound like hundreds of feet shuffling in perfect rhythm, as if a procession were descending the hills toward the estate. People moved aside, craning their necks. Children climbed onto their mothers' backs for a better view. Torches were raised higher. At first, nothing appeared, just a shimmering ripple of heat rising from the dirt road. But then, silhouettes, dozens, no, hundreds, people walking slowly, steadily, in silence. Except they were not from Escada, not from any town nearby. They were strangers. An old man squinted, shading his eyes. São trabalhadores das outras fazendas? Workers from other plantations? But someone else whispered, no, look at their clothes. And they were right. These were not the clothes of the living, not entirely. The figures approaching wore garments faded as dust, some with torn hems, some with stains, some with patterns that hadn't been woven in decades. Some looked like they had stepped straight out of 1860. Others looked older, much older. The closer they got, the quieter the yard became. Even the wind seemed afraid to move. A woman in the crowd suddenly fell to her knees, sobbing. My God, my mother, she's my mother. She pointed at one of the figures, a woman with long braids, a cloth wrapped around her waist, and a necklace of wooden beads that clicked softly as she walked. But the figure did not look at her. None of them did. Their eyes were half open, unfocused, as if following a path older than the land itself. The widow clutched Íria's arm. What are they? She asked in a choked whisper. Íria didn't look away from the procession. They're memories, she said. Memories walking. People backed away, not out of fear, out of reverence. Some women covered their heads. Some men bowed. Some children hid behind skirts. The inspector whispered to Íria, are these spirits? Íria tilted her head slightly, that same uncanny gesture. No, they're echoes. Echoes of the ones who died in silence. As the procession reached the gates of the estate, something miraculous or horrifying happened. Their feet did not disturb the dust, not a single footprint. They passed through the entrance with the grace of prayer and the weight of grief. And the moment the first figure crossed into the yard, every flame flickered inward as if pulled toward them. The corpse of Tonico, still lying on the balcony, began to twitch. The widow screamed. 2 policemen stepped back. The magistrate, still half conscious, cried out, Don't let them touch me. But the echoes did not rise toward him. Instead, they walked toward the pit, one by one, slow, steady, methodical. And then, all at once, they knelt. Hundreds of echoes kneeling in front of the pit, their heads bowed, hands resting on the earth. And the crowd, the living, felt a force at their knees like a wave. Men collapsed. Women dropped where they stood. Children sank without understanding why. The entire estate, hundreds of people, bowed, all except Íria. She remained standing, small, slight, still barefoot, still resolute. The inspector, struggling to understand, whispered, Why are they kneeling? Íria spoke softly, like someone translating a foreign language spoken from beneath the ground. They're calling for recognition. The echoes lifted their heads. Their mouths opened, but no sound came out. Instead, Íria's breath hit sharply. She staggered. The old woman rushed toward her. Menina, okay, isso. Íria raised a trembling hand, stopping her. "They're speaking." The inspector swallowed. "What are they saying?" Íria turned toward the crowd, toward the living, her eyes glassy, her voice layered again, as if carrying hundreds of tones at once. "They're saying, we are not shadows. We are not ghosts. We were the hands that built this land. And now you must carry our names." Tears flooded the yard. Men who had never bowed before bowed again. Women pressed their foreheads to the earth. The priest sobbed openly, his cross shaking in his hands. The echoes, those memory forms shaped by centuries of suffocated history, began to dissolve slowly, like mist caught in sunlight, one by one, softly, gently, until nothing remained except the pit, the bones, and the silence. A silence so deep it felt like the earth's heartbeat had paused. Then Íria spoke again, voice thin, tired. "Now the city knows." The inspector looked around. "Knows what?" Íria closed her eyes. That the dead were never gone, only waiting. She stumbled, the first sign of weakness she had shown since the beginning. The old woman caught her, cradling Iria's head to her chest. "Child, you need rest. You're burning." Íria whispered, "No, not yet." "Why not?" the old woman asked desperately. Íria opened her eyes, and for a moment they reflected something vast, something that looked like 1,000 faces layered behind her. "Because tomorrow," she said, "we walk into the city." The inspector blinked. "With who?" Íria looked at the pit. "With all of them." No one slept that night. Not truly. Some closed their eyes, but sleep never came. Not the kind that rests the bones. What they felt was something else. Anticipation, dread, reverence, an ache in the chest that felt like being pulled to a future they didn't choose but suddenly belonged to. The inspector walked around the estate like a man carrying a lantern inside a nightmare. Every shadow looking like it might speak. The widow sat by the doorway of the house, staring at her hands as if they were no longer hers. Sometimes she whispered apologies to no one in particular. Sometimes she rocked softly, saying her mother's name over and over. Sometimes she looked at Íria as if the girl were both salvation and punishment. The priest prayed until his voice turned hoarse. Not lofty prayers with rehearsed phrases. No, these were raw prayers, desperate, stumbling, terrified. Prayers of a man realizing his whole life had been too small to understand the world he claimed to interpret. And Íria sat in the dirt beside the pit. Not on fabric, not on a chair, on the ground itself. Her palms pressed to the soil, her eyes half closed as if listening to heartbeat rhythms that no living ear could detect. She had not eaten. She had not slept. She had barely blinked. It was as if she had become part of the land. Near dawn, the old woman approached her slowly, carrying a bowl of water and cassava bread. "Menina, please, you need strength. Tomorrow will be too heavy for a child." Íria opened her eyes. Her voice was thin but steady. "I'm not carrying it alone." The old woman's hands trembled. "Even so, you must breathe. You must drink." Íria took the bowl, and for the first time in hours, sipped. The crowd watched, relieved, like witnesses seeing proof that she was still flesh and bone, not some apparition wearing a child's shape. The inspector approached cautiously. "Íria, what exactly will happen in the city?" he asked. She didn't look at him. "Truth," she murmured. "Truth that no one can step over." "That's not an answer," the inspector insisted. Íria finally turned her face toward him. "You saw the echoes walk," she said. "You saw them kneel. Do you think they came to stay buried again?" The inspector swallowed hard. "No," he admitted. "No, I don't." Íria nodded approvingly, then looked back at the pit. "They will walk with us," she said, "not as shadows, but as memory made flesh." A young boy nearby asked timidly, "Are they coming back again, Menina? Are we going to see them again?" Íria reached out and touched the boy's cheek gently. "You won't see them like last night," she said, "but you will feel them. Every step we take tomorrow will be their step too." The boy shivered, but didn't run. Children understand truth quicker than adults. They just fear it less. By sunrise, the estate was full again, not with echoes this time, but with people. Real bodies, real families, Real grief and real rage. Men gathered tools, some picks, some shovels, some sticks. Women wrapped cloth around their heads, tightened their skirts, packed food into sacks. Elders stood with staffs carved with stories older than the empire itself. The inspector approached the magistrate, who still lay weak and trembling on a cot. "You're coming too," he said. The magistrate let out a broken laugh that sounded like defeat. "If I walk into that city," he whispered, "they'll kill me." "No," Íria said from behind them, her voice calm. "They'll listen to you. Then they'll decide what forgiveness means." The magistrate's eyes widened with terror. "I don't deserve forgiveness." Íria shrugged. "That's for them to decide, not you." The widow stepped forward, her expression harsh, firm. "You will walk beside me," she told the magistrate. "If I survived years under that man, you can survive one walk." She didn't wait for his reply. She simply helped him stand. For a moment, the magistrate looked at her as if seeing her for the first time, not as a fragile shadow behind a powerful man, but as a woman carved by survival itself. The crowd formed a line, wide, long, stretching down the road like a river of grief about to burst through stone. Íria stood at the front, barefoot, small and impossibly steady. Behind her stood the old woman on her left, the inspector on her right, the widow just behind them, the priest clutching a Bible and the magistrate pale and shaking. Someone in the crowd murmured, "She's leading them like Moses." "No," another whispered, "not Moses. She's like the ones he followed, the ones who spoke from the mountain, or the ones who whispered from the burning bush." But Íria didn't hear them, or perhaps she heard everything. She raised her hand slowly, not theatrically, not dramatically, just raised it the way someone does when asking an entire nation to pause. And the yard fell silent. Even the wind waited. "Before we walk," Íria said, "they want to say something." People stiffened. Several crossed themselves. A few knelt instinctively. Íria placed her hand on her chest, closed her eyes, and inhaled. The air around her rippled, not visibly, not loudly, but unmistakably, like the breath of an unseen presence brushing against the world. When she opened her eyes again, her voice had changed, not as dramatically as the night before, but deeper, fuller. "We are walking," she said. "So the city cannot pretend it did not know. So the children who grew up without names can finally be called. So the wounds hidden inside houses can breathe. So the ground that swallowed us can rise. And so history will not be written by the hands that hurt us." Several people began weeping. Íria continued, "This is not a march of vengeance. This is a march of remembrance. And remembrance is stronger than revenge." The widow nodded fiercely. The inspector lowered his head. The priest whispered, "Amen." Íria lowered her hand and stepped forward one pace. The earth answered with a soft tremor. Barely there, but everyone felt it. She stepped again. Another tremor. Not violent, not destructive, just present. And then as the crowd began to move, something remarkable happened. They felt weight behind them. Not bodies, not shadows, not feet. Presence, like hundreds of invisible people walking in perfect rhythm behind them. Some staggered, overwhelmed. Some smiled through tears. Some reached back instinctively, as if expecting to touch someone's hand. Íria didn't look back. She didn't need to. "They're with us," she said softly. A woman asked, "Will the city see them?" "No," Íria said, "but the city will feel them." The road to Escada was long, winding, and uneven, but the march moved like water, unstoppable, steady, righteous. And with each step, something ancient and unspoken whispered to the crowd. "We are not buried. We are not silent. We are not forgotten." When the first rooftops of Escada appeared on the horizon, Íria slowed. She lifted her hand again. The crowd halted instantly. She turned, facing them, her face a mixture of exhaustion and unshakable resolve. "The city stands on the bones of the ones they refuse to name," she said. "Today we name them." She pointed toward Escada's church towers. "And today they will kneel." Cities don't wake up gently when history is coming for them. Escada felt it before it heard anything. A pressure in the air, an unbalanced weight. The strange sensation of being watched by something too quiet, too patient. Fishermen at the river paused mid-net. Vendors arriving early to set up their stalls hesitated before unlocking their carts. Dogs whimpered, ears low, and refused to walk in the direction of the road that led to the Albuquerque estate. And inside the church, Father Simplicio, a man who had never doubted his place in the hierarchy of things, stopped mid-prayer as a cold wave ran down his spine. Something was coming. Something enormous. Something impossible to bless away. By the time the sun reached the first rooftops, the sound arrived. Feet, many feet, soft, deliberate, thousands of footsteps pressing the earth in perfect rhythm. Not marching, not running, approaching. A young boy ran from the outskirts of town, breathless. Padre, Padre, a multideo ta vindo, a menina ta vindo. The priest didn't understand at first. What girl? The menina que felicamo es mortos. Simplicio's hands began to shake. He didn't believe in superstition. Not professionally, anyway, but he had heard the whispers. He had seen the way parishioners cross themselves 3 times instead of 1 when speaking of Íria. He had seen the fear in the magistrate's eyes when rumors reached the city. Still, he wasn't ready for the sight that appeared moments later. From the top of the slope that led into Escada, Íria emerged, walking barefoot, surrounded by a river of people whose faces held grief, exhaustion, resolve, and something else, something that looked frighteningly like conviction. Behind them, something else moved. Not bodies, not shadows, but presence, a pressure so strong Simplicio felt in his knees. He stumbled back. "My God!" A woman beside him whispered, "It's not God, Father. It's them." The city froze as Íria and the crowd descended the hillside. Some shopkeepers shut their doors. Others stepped out, drawn by curiosity stronger than fear. Children abandoned their play and clung to their mothers' skirts. Men straightened, sensing something that transcended politics or class. As Íria stepped onto the main road of Escada, the inspector walked behind her. The widow walked beside him. The old woman walked on Íria's right. The magistrate staggered between 2 officers, pale, trembling. The priest of the estate's chapel trailed behind them, holding his cross, whispering prayers through cracked lips. It was a procession unlike anything Pernambuco had ever witnessed, neither holy nor secular, neither rebellion nor ritual. It was something in between, something older, something the empire had no language to describe. The first confrontation came from the elite. A group of wealthy landowners stood in their fine coats near the municipal square, blocking the road. Their leader, Senora Delmar, a stout man with soft hands and a hard voice, raised his cane angrily. "Stop right there. You will not bring chaos into the city." The crowd behind Íria bristled. Men stepped forward. Women tightened their wraps. Children hid behind legs. But Íria lifted her hand. Instantly, the crowd halted. Her command wasn't shouted, wasn't forceful. It was simply obeyed. She stepped forward on her own, her small frame casting a shadow far longer than her body had any right to cast. Delmar sneered. "What is this, Menina? Some circus? Some attempt to turn the city against its own people?" Íria tilted her head. "You're afraid," she said softly. Delmar scoffed. "I'm not afraid of a child." Íria didn't blink. "You should be." A ripple of whispering surged through the crowd. Delmar stepped closer, jabbing his cane into the dirt. "You have no authority here." Íria looked around slowly, at the people in the windows, the ones peeking from behind half-open doors, the vendors watching from behind baskets of fruit. "Yes," she said, "I do." "Who gave it to you?" Delmar demanded. Íria stepped closer and pointed behind her, toward the invisible presence following them. "They did." Delmar tried to laugh, but it died in his throat, because a gust of wind, cold as river water, pushed against him. Not a natural wind, a directed one. The crowd gasped. Delmar stumbled backward, his cane slipping from his hand. For a second, his face showed naked terror. What was that?" Íria answered. "Recognition." The widow stepped forward, her voice trembling but steady. Move aside, Adelmar. Your husband dined with mine. You both pretended not to hear the screams. Adelmar's eyes widened. You dare? Yes, she said. For the first time in my life, I dare. She pointed toward Íria. And she's the reason. Adelmar's wife, who had been standing behind him, suddenly stepped away from him and joined the widow's side. Let them pass, she said, voice thin but firm. Adelmar stared at her. You too. His wife only nodded. The resistance crumbled. Elite men stepped back one by one. Some out of fear, some out of shame, some out of the dawning awareness that they were wildly outnumbered. Íria kept walking. At the sight of her, some people dropped to their knees, not bowing to her, bowing to what followed her. Others whispered prayers. Others cried. Some simply watched, unable to move. When Íria reached the heart of the city, the municipal square, the bells of the church rang, not in celebration, not in warning. They rang wildly, chaotically, as if someone had grabbed the ropes with shaking hands. Simplicio rushed out of the church, nearly tripping over his own cassock. Girl, he shouted, please, if this is sorcery, if this is vengeance. Íria raised her hand. The priest fell silent instantly. She approached him slowly. This is truth, she said, the kind you were supposed to protect. Simplicio swallowed. Tears filled his eyes. I didn't know, he whispered. You didn't ask, Íria replied. A painful hush fell over the square. The inspector stepped forward, projecting his voice. People of Escada, he said, yesterday we found a mass grave at the Albuquerque estate. Gasps, hands-covered mouths. Someone fainted. Íria continued. We found names. A murmur spread. Children, parents, grandparents, gone without explanation, gone without funerals, gone without dignity. We found a room, she said next. A room where screams lived. People flinched as if slapped. And we found silence. A silence that you knew. A silence you walked past. A silence you accepted. Some cried. Some shook their heads. Some whispered apologies to no one and everyone at once. Then the magistrate, shaking, stepped forward. He tried to speak. His voice broke. I helped hide it. A collective gasp exploded. Not anger, not shock, grief, weary, exhausted grief. I signed the papers, he whispered. I closed the cases. I silenced the mothers. Why? Someone shouted. Because I was a coward, he choked. No, Íria said, because you wanted comfort more than truth. A woman screamed, not at Íria, but at the magistrate. You let them kill my husband. Another voice. You told us our daughter drowned. Another. You lied to every mother in the city. The magistrate collapsed under the weight of their grief, sobbing, incoherent. But Íria lifted her hand again. The crowd froze. They don't want revenge, she said. They want remembrance. She turned slowly, looking at every face in the square. Now it's the city's turn. People trembled. Men who had never bowed in their lives looked at the ground. Women who had carried their families on their backs held their breath. Children clung to their mothers. Íria pointed to the church steps. Kneel. No one moved. Not yet. Not out of refusal. Out of the shock of being asked to strip themselves of denial, Íria stepped onto the first church step. Behind her, that invisible presence pressed forward, heavy, immense, impossible to ignore. People flinched. Some gasped. Others clutched at their chests as if something had touched them. And then, one man fell to his knees. A vendor. No one noticed him at first, but they noticed the second, and the third. Soon women knelt. Children followed. The priest knelt, both hands gripping his cross. The inspector knelt. Even some elite men, trembling, sickened, humbled, knelt. Only one person remained standing. Adelmar. He shook his head aggressively, sweating. I will not kneel. I did nothing. Íria turned toward him, tilting her head. That same eerie gesture that meant she was listening to something no one else could hear. You ate from their suffering, she said. You profited from their silence. and you looked away from their pain. Adelmar opened his mouth to protest, but his body buckled. He clutched his chest, eyes bulged, knees hit the ground like stone. Everyone saw it. Everyone felt it. Íria closed her eyes. "They asked for it," she whispered. When she opened her eyes again, the square was silent. Every head bowed, every person kneeling, except Íria. She took a deep breath and said the words that sealed a moment into history. "Now," she whispered, "they can begin to rest." When the last knee touched the earth, a sound rose through the square, not from mouths, not from throats, but from the very air. A hum, low, vibrating, ancient, the kind of sound that feels like it's coming from beneath your ribs, from the marrow of your bones. A sound older than stories, older than prayer. People gasped, others clutched their chests. Children covered their ears. The priest's cross shook in his hands, as if trying to leap from his grip. Íria didn't flinch. She stood in the center of the square, barely taller than some of the children kneeling beside their mothers. Barefoot, still, eyes half closed, listening. The sound grew not louder, but deeper, as if layers of voices were merging, as if hundreds of whispers were aligning into a single vibration. A woman sobbed into her hands. "What is that?" she cried. "My God, what is that?" Íria opened her eyes. The widow looked up slowly, tears streaming. "Are they angry?" Íria shook her head. "No." The humming shifted, a rise, a fall, like the breath of something immense trying to speak. "They're relieved." A collective exhale spilled across the square. Men who had held their breath unconsciously began to cry. Women leaned forward, resting their foreheads on the ground. Even those who doubted Íria, who resisted the march, who were behind privilege or pride, even they felt it, a release, a weight shifting. For generations, the city had walked with stone in its chest. Now that stone cracked, but the hum wasn't fading. It was growing steadier, stronger, almost organized. The inspector frowned, whispering to Íria, "What are they doing now?" "They're choosing," she said. "Choosing what?" She didn't answer. Not immediately. She lifted her chin and listened again, really listened, as if the hum wasn't noise but language. Finally, she turned toward the crowd. "They're choosing who will carry their stories." People looked up, confused, fearful. Someone shouted, "What does that mean? Carry how? Carry where?" Íria stepped forward. One step, then another, until she reached the first row of kneeling people. A boy of maybe 10 years old looked up at her nervously. She placed her hand on his forehead. The boy gasped. His mother grabbed his shoulder, terrified. Íria removed her hand. The boy stared at the ground, breathing rapidly. "What did you do to him?" his mother cried. Íria shook her head. "He's fine. They just gave him a memory." The mother trembled. "What memory?" "A song his ancestor used to sing. He'll remember it when he hears drums." The boy blinked several times, then whispered, "Mekiyu uvi." The mother covered her mouth. People leaned forward, trembling. Íria moved to someone else, a teenage girl kneeling beside her grandmother. She touched the girl's cheek. The girl inhaled sharply, eyes wide. Íria said, "She now carries the prayer her great-grandmother whispered before she died." The grandmother sobbed. "My May, you heard my May?" Íria nodded. She's been waiting for someone to receive her words. The hum deepened. Íria continued moving, person, sometimes touching a shoulder, sometimes a forehead, sometimes a hand. Some gasped, some cried, some fainted, some froze. Each one received something, a forgotten name, a lullaby, a warning, a face, a moment, a scent, a fear, a hope. Each person became a vessel. "What is this?" the inspector whispered, sweating. "Some kind of possession?" "No," Íria said. "Possession is taking. They are giving." The magistrate, still kneeling, sobbed uncontrollably, voice cracking. "Why won't they give me anything?" Íria turned toward him. Her gaze was colder, not cruel, but final. "They don't want anything in you," she said. You carry enough already." The whisper traveled to the crowd like cold wind. He collapsed, shaking, unable to speak. As Íria stepped back into the center of the square, the humming shifted again. Thinned, softened, faded like dusk fading to evening. "They're leaving," someone whispered. "No," Íria said. "They're settling." And indeed, the presence didn't vanish. It rooted in the people, in the air, in the ground, like seeds returning to soil. But one question still gnawed at the crowd. A man finally stood, trembling. "Menina, if they're resting, if they're giving memories, if they forgive, why do you still look so afraid?" The square fell silent. Even the breeze stilled. Íria didn't answer right away. She looked down at her hands, the same hands that had touched so many lives in the last hours. Her fingers trembled, not from exhaustion, from fear. Real fear. The old woman noticed first. "Child, what is it?" she whispered. The inspector stepped forward. "Íria, talk to us." The priest clutched his cross tighter. The crowd leaned in. Íria swallowed, a tiny motion that felt like the whole square moved with her. And then she said the words that made the air freeze. "They're resting," but something else woke up. A wave of murmurs. "What?" "Okay, Eladies?" "Woke up." "Duque?" "From where?" Íria's voice dropped. Low. "Haunted. I didn't tell you everything," she said. "There were more than bones in that pit." The widow's face blanched. The inspector stiffened. The priest took a shaky step backward. "What do you mean more?" he stammered. Íria raised her face toward the old church tower, as if looking through time itself. Her eyes darkened with a truth so heavy she almost buckled under it. There was something buried deeper, something older than the plantation, older than Tonico, older than the city. A chill ran through the crowd. "Something you woke," Íria whispered, and tried to hide. The inspector stepped closer, voice breaking. "What did he wake?" Íria's voice trembled. For the first time since the beginning, a spirit that doesn't belong to the dead. A woman screamed. Someone fainted. A teen grabbed his father's arm in panic. The priest shouted, "What kind of spirit?" Íria closed her eyes, as if hearing a voice behind her shoulder. And when she opened them again, her voice was barely more than breath, the one that whispered cruelty into him. Gasps, sobs, backward steps. Íria continued. The one that lived beneath the state long before the plantation, long before the sugar, long before Escada existed. She pointed toward the horizon, toward the estate, toward the pit. They didn't just bury people there. They buried something that fed on their fear. Her voice broke, and the crowd stiffened as one aching body. The inspector whispered, "Íria, that thing, did it wake up fully?" Íria nodded slowly. Tears filled her eyes. "It woke," she whispered. "And it's not resting." When Íria said it woke, something shifted in the square, a movement not of bodies, but a certainty. The people had walked with grief. They had faced the truth. They had kneeled. They had received memories from the dead. But this was different. This wasn't about the past. This was about something alive. A man near the front of the crowd whispered, "Meu Deus, what is she saying?" Another, trembling, replied, "She's saying there's something worse than Tonico." The inspector took a step toward Íria, his face pale. "Menina, you need to explain. What exactly woke up?" Íria looked down at her hands. The tremor in her fingers grew stronger. "It has no name," she said quietly. The priest crossed himself 3 times. "No name?" he exclaimed. "Everything has a name. Angel, demon, guardian." Íria shook her head. "No, this is older than the names." The priest's face drained of color. Behind him, the old woman closed her eyes, her voice trembling in Yoruba. "Koasai Oruko Fun Gentio Ti Peju. There is no name for what is older than time." The crowd shuddered in fear. Íria continued, her voice tightening. "It wasn't one of them, not one of the dead. It didn't call me like they do. It didn't whisper pain." She lifted her eyes. It whispered hunger. People gasped. Some stepped back. Some clutched the arms of those beside them. Some began to cry, not out of sorrow, but out of a primal fear that clings to the spine. The inspector swallowed hard. When did you feel it? Last night? When the echoes came? Íria shook her head. No, I felt it before. Long before. The widow stepped forward, hands trembling. How long? Íria hesitated, then whispered. Since I was 7. The widow staggered backward. 7? You were just a child. Íria didn't look away. It called to me from the ground, from under the estate, from the well they'd buried and pretended wasn't there, from the darkness Tonico visited alone at night. The inspector rubbed his face with both hands. How long did Tonico know about it? Íria's voice darkened. He didn't know its name, but he knew its taste. A chill ran across every back in the square. What taste? Someone asked. Íria stared at the ground. Fear. A low moan swept through the crowd like wind through tall grass. Men clutched their chests. Women shook their heads violently. Children buried their faces in their mothers' skirts. He fed it, Íria said. The inspector blinked. What do you mean? Fed it how? Íria's voice trembled, not out of weakness, but because the memory sickened her. He took people to the well, not just to hide them, not just to kill them. She raised her face, but because it wanted them. Screams broke out in the square. Some cried, some cursed, some ran a few steps before collapsing to their knees. The priest stumbled backward, shaking uncontrollably. That's not possible, he whispered. That's superstition. Darkness. Evil. Íria interrupted. It's not evil. Everyone froze. She finished. It's hunger. The widow sobbed loudly. My God, my God. Íria walked into the center of the square again. She looked impossibly small, a fragile silhouette surrounded by hundreds. Yet the air bent toward her. The presence behind her pulsed. And when she spoke again, her voice carried an echo, not of the dead, but of something deeper. It doesn't care about names, or sins, or prayers. It wants what has been fed to it for centuries. The inspector whispered, What does it want now? Íria's voice broke. More. The panic hit like a wave. Women grabbed their children. Men backed away. The priest dropped to his knees, babbling prayers. Even the magistrate, half conscious on the stretcher, flinched and tried to cover his ears. Where's it now? Someone cried. Is it coming here? Another shouted. Is it following us? No! Another screamed. We brought it with us. The square erupted into chaos, voices rising, bodies trembling, hands grabbing for loved ones. Íria raised both hands. Instantly, impossibly, the chaos stopped. Not slowly, not gradually. Stopped, as if someone had pressed a hand against the world. Íria inhaled deeply, and when she exhaled, it sounded like she was releasing something heavy, something clinging to her ribs. Then she said, It can't leave this state. The crowd sagged in relief. People cried. Others wiped sweat from their foreheads. The priest let out a shaky breath. But Íria wasn't finished. It's bound to that land, she continued. To the well, to the soil soaked with fear. The inspector frowned. So it can't harm the city? Íria tilted her head. It doesn't need to. Confusion rippled across the square. What does that mean? Someone asked. Íria took a step back. Her shadow stretched unnaturally long across the ground, longer than the morning sun should allow. It woke because we woke the memories, she said. It grew strong because the dead rose. A chill swept through the crowd. And it's listening. The inspector stepped closer. To what? To us, Íria said. To our grief. To our guilt. To our anger. Her voice broke. And it's waiting. For what? The old woman asked. Íria finally looked afraid. Truly afraid. In a way she had never allowed herself to look until now. For someone to walk back to the estate, she whispered. The square froze. What happens if someone goes back? The inspector asked. Íria closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, tears slipped down her cheeks. It won't let them leave. A full silence fell, heavy, suffocating, devastating. A A mother hugged her child tighter. An elderly man shook his head repeatedly. The priest trembled violently. The inspector swallowed. Íria doesn't want to sacrifice. Her eyes widened. No. A pause. Then she whispered, "It wants a witness." The square erupted again, but this time not in fear, in dread. Horrible, ancient dread. The widow stepped forward. Who does it want? Íria stared at her, at her face, at her trembling hands, at the grief carved into her bones. And then Íria whispered, voice barely audible, "Not who?" The inspector asked, "What then?" Íria looked toward the horizon, toward the estate, toward the well, and whispered, "It wants whoever goes first." When Íria said, "It wants whoever goes first," the square seemed to inhale and hold its breath, not metaphorically, literally. For several long, paralyzing seconds, no one breathed. Parents hugged their children. Men stiffened their spines. Women instinctively pressed their hands over their hearts, as if trying to hold their souls in place. The priest whispered, barely audible, "Meu Deus, isso não é de terra." Íria shook her head. "No, it isn't." The inspector wiped sweat from his brow. "So, no one goes back," he said, desperate. "No one. We avoid the estate. We block the roads. We—" Íria interrupted gently. "You can't avoid a shadow by closing your eyes." A shudder ran through the crowd. The widow stepped forward, holding the edges of her skirt so tightly the fabric trembled in her hands. "Íria, do you mean it will follow us?" "No," Íria said softly. "It can't leave the place where it was born." Someone asked, "But then why does anyone have to go back?" "For closure," Íria said. "For it. For them. For us." The inspector threw his hands up. "This is madness. You're telling us a spirit, a thing older than this land, wants a witness? A human witness? For what? A bargain? A curse?" Íria looked at him, and her expression was so sad, so tired. He felt his throat tighten. "It wants to be seen," she said. A silence spread across the square like frost. "Seen?" a teenage girl asked. "Why would something like that want to be seen?" "Because seeing is power," Íria whispered. "And for centuries, only the cruel looked at it." The widow gasped. "Tonico." Íria nodded. He looked. He listened. He fed it. Her gaze darkened. "And now that he's dead, it wants someone else to recognize it." "Why?" the inspector demanded. What does recognition even mean to something like that? Íria's answer chilled him more than anything so far. "It means it can rest." A man shouted from the back, "Rest? A creatura que com medo. Why should we help that rest?" Íria stepped toward him. "Because it keeps the pain from sinking deeper," she said. "If it's left awake, it will grow. It will find ways to feed. You won't need to go to the well. The fear will come to you." A wave of dread passed through the crowd. Children cried. Women prayed. Men shook their heads violently as if trying to deny the air itself. The inspector's voice broke. "So, someone has to go back." Íria nodded. "Yes. And whoever goes dies," a woman cried. "No," Íria said firmly. "Then what happens?" the widow asked. Íria whispered. "They don't die, but they don't come back the same." The priest staggered backward. "What are you saying, child?" "They come back carrying its memory," Íria said. "Forever." A too long silence followed. Finally, the old woman stepped forward. Her eyes were wet, but her voice was iron. "If someone must go, let me go. I'm old. I've lived enough. Let the young stay." Íria reached out and held the old woman's trembling hands. "No." The widow stepped closer. "Then I'll go," she said. "I live a lie beside a monster. Maybe this is how I balance it." "No," Íria whispered again. A man cried out. "Then who, Menina? Who?" Íria lowered her gaze. "I don't know." The inspector grabbed her shoulders, frantic. "Then how do we choose? A lottery? A volunteer? A ritual?" Íria shook her head. "No choosing." "Then what?" he shouted. Her voice came out like a breath of wind. "It will choose." Gasps erupted. Faces paled. A woman screamed. The magistrate, barely conscious, suddenly began to shake violently. Naomi, leave. Poor favor Naomi, leave. You fazer do. The widow almost kicked him. In your right mind, would you choose a coward like you? But Íria stared at him, really stared. And for a horrible second, everyone thought she was about to say his name, but she didn't. She simply said, "It doesn't choose by guild." The inspector whispered, "Then how does it choose?" Íria hesitated. Her eyes flickered, not with fear, but with the weight of something she didn't want to say. "It chooses the one who can see it clearly," she whispered. "See?" someone asked. "You mean someone like you?" Íria's breathing faltered. A woman gasped. "Meu Deus, Ella." The inspector grabbed Íria's wrist. No, absolutely not. You're a child." Íria pulled her arm back gently. "The dead chose me to speak. But this is different." The widow stepped forward, voice cracking. "Íria, minha filha, are you saying that thing wants you?" Íria looked away. The crowd murmured. "No, Neo, it can't be. She's just a menina. Why her?" But the old woman watched Íria with narrowed eyes and sudden understanding. "Menina," she whispered, "tell us the truth." Íria closed her eyes. The air seemed to freeze. Then she whispered, "It has been calling me since I was 7. I hear it every time I dream." Screams broke out. People sobbed. The priest dropped to his knees. The inspector staggered back, shaking. No, this can't be happening." But Íria wasn't finished. She took a deep breath. When Tanako died, she said, it opened its eyes fully, and the first thing it did was look for me. The widow screamed. A child began wailing uncontrollably. Men shouted for prayers. Women cried, "Ave Maria," over and over. The inspector clutched Íria's shoulders. "No, you are not going." Íria looked at him with infinite sadness. "I might not have a choice." The priest stood and shouted, "Satanas está usando essa menina." Íria turned toward him, shaking her head softly. "It's not Satan." Then she said 4 words that shattered the priest's certainty. "It's older than him." Silence erupted, sharp, cold, absolute. And then Íria whispered, "And if no one goes?" The inspector forced himself to ask, "What happens?" Íria closed her eyes, tears falling silently. The answer came out in a whisper, so soft it barely existed. "It will come looking." The square trembled. The crowd collapsed into chaos. But one question echoed above all others. If Íria isn't the one it wants, who will it choose? Panic doesn't explode all at once. It leaks. It seeps through words, glances, half-finished sentences. It crawls down spines and settles in the knees, turning certainty into tremor. Escada was leaking. Small groups broke off in the square, arguing in hushed, frantic tones. "I'm not letting my son anywhere near that road." "If no one goes," she said, "it'll come here. She's only a child. Meu Deus." Someone stop this. What if she's right? What if this is bigger than all of us? From windows and doorways, faces watched, pale, rigid, holding their breath. You could feel it in every brick and beam. The city had been cracked open, and now everyone was trying to decide what to do with the pieces. In the center of the square, Íria stood alone for the first time since they arrived. No one dared touch her, not because she scared them, though some were scared, but because she seemed to belong to something else now, to the voices, to the land, to the wound itself. The inspector walked back toward her, his jaw tight, hands shaking. "Listen to me," he said quietly, too quietly for the crowd to hear. "You're not going back there. I don't care what it wants. I don't care what it calls. You're a child." Íria looked him straight in the eyes. "So were the others," she said. His breath caught. "What others?" "The ones Tanako took there," she answered. He swallowed hard. "That's not the same." She tilted her head. "Isn't it?" The question sliced through him. He'd spent his whole career convincing himself that some lives weighed more than others. That order matter more than individual screams, that the Empire's version of peace was worth the cracks beneath it. Now, looking at a 12-year-old girl standing in front of a kneeling city, he understood. Every scream had always been louder than the law. They had just chosen not to hear it. The widow approached slowly. Her face looked older than it had that morning, as if each hour had carved another year into her skin. She placed a trembling hand on Íria's shoulder. "My daughter," her voice broke. "My child, I can't watch you walk into something like that." Íria turned to her gently. "You watched worse," she said softly. The widow flinched, not in anger, but in painful agreement. "I watched and did nothing," she whispered. This is different." The old woman stepped forward, leaning on her staff. "No one will send her alone," she said firmly. "If that thing wants a witness, let it see that she is not the only one who can look in the face." A few people murmured in agreement. A fisherman spoke up. "I'll go too. I've seen death. The river takes who it wants. If something needs to be faced, I won't let a child go alone." Another voice rose, a young black woman with scars across her forearms. "Tanako burned my brother," she said. "If there's something at the bottom of all this, I want to see its face." The inspector shook his head. "This isn't a crowd problem. We can't just send people in like a parade. If this thing is what she says it is, it will take whoever goes first." Íria reminded him quietly. The willingness in the air faltered. The crowd sank back into uneasy silence, because here was the cruel truth. Courage is loud until it realizes it might be chosen. For a moment, the square felt like a held coin, spinning on its edge, ready to fall to one side or the other. Then a voice broke through. "I'll go." It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Everyone turned. It was the magistrate. He stood on shaking legs, pale, eyes bloodshot from crying. His whole body trembled like a man trying to stand in a storm. The inspector frowned. "You can barely walk." The magistrate nodded. "Yes, but I can still kneel." Íria watched him carefully. "You're afraid," she said. "Yes," he replied. "More than I've ever been." "Then why offer?" the widow demanded, her voice sharp. The magistrate looked at her, really looked, the way he should have years ago when she stood on his office steps begging for help. "Because I spent decades letting others be taken instead of me," he whispered. The words hung heavy. "I signed papers." He swallowed. "I buried names. I chose silence every time truth knocked on my door." He looked at Íria. "And now something is knocking again." He paused, his voice breaking. "This time, I want to open on me." The crowd murmured. Some scoffed. "Coward now turned hero?" Others shook their heads. Easy be brave when you're already broken. But some understood. He wasn't asking for redemption. He was asking not to die a man who only ever saved himself. The priest approached, still shaking, his cross hanging crooked around his neck. "You don't understand what you're offering," he said. "No," the magistrate replied. "I finally do." He turned to Íria. "If I go, will it take me?" Íria's eyes darkened. "I don't choose," she said. "It does." He nodded slowly. "Good. Then let it decide what I'm worth." The widow stepped closer, jaw clenched. "You should have done this years ago," she said. "I know," he whispered. She studied him for a long, aching second. Then unexpectedly she added, "But at least you're doing it now." The inspector pulled Íria aside. "This is insane," he hissed. "If he dies, if he doesn't come back, the Empire will blame all of us. They'll say we killed him. They'll send soldiers." "They already would have," Íria said, "as soon as the bones were found." He didn't argue. He couldn't. "What if it doesn't take him?" he asked. "Then it will choose again," she said, "until it finds someone who can see it without feeding it." He shuddered. "How do you see something like that without feeding it?" "By not loving its power," Íria replied. The answer sank into him like cold water into old wood. He knew then he could never be the one. He had believed in power his entire life. The priest spoke, voice brittle but determined. "If he goes, he does not go alone. Someone must walk with him in prayer." The The old woman nodded. Then I walked too, she said. Not you, the inspector protested. She smiled sadly. Son, I walked through slavery. I walked through hunger. I walked through nights when men like Tanako thought the dark belonged to them. She touched Íria's cheek. I won't let this girl carry all the shadows. Íria held her hand against her face. They won't take you, she whispered. The old woman smiled. I know. They tried before. I lived anyway. The decision hangs there, fragile and terrifying. 3 will walk. 1 will be chosen. The rest of the square, the city, the living history of that region, stood watching, either shocked or silently relieved that their names had not been spoken. Finally, Íria turned to the crowd and said, "This is not a sacrifice." Her voice rang with quiet force. "This is a witness. Someone must see what hunger looks like when it has no chains. Someone must carry that memory, so no one ever feeds it again." The widow wiped her face, swallowed, and stepped forward once more. "I won't walk with you," she told the magistrate. "I won't accompany you into that place." He nodded, ashamed. Then she added, "But I will be here when you come back, or when they bring your body." It was the closest thing to forgiveness he would ever receive. Íria looked toward the road, leading back to the estate. She felt it before anyone else did. A pull, soft, insistent, like a tide. It's wait. The old woman squeezed her hand. "Then let's not keep it waiting long." The inspector grabbed Íria's arm one last time. "You're sure I can't go instead?" he asked, voice cracking. She looked at him with a tired sort of tenderness. "You only started listening yesterday," she said. "It needs someone who's been hearing it for years." He let go, because he knew she was right. The priest raised his cross. "Then I bless you," he said, tears spilling freely. "Not because I understand this, but because I refuse to let you walk without someone asking heaven to watch." Íria nodded. "Heaven has watched a long time," she said. "Now it's our turn." The city watched as the 3 figures stepped out of the square. A girl, an old woman, a broken man, walking toward a place that had swallowed cries for decades, walking toward a hunger that finally had a name, the thing beneath the well, even if no one dared to say it out loud. The path back to the estate felt different now. It wasn't the same road they had taken that morning, the one filled with chanting grief and the presence of the dead. This one felt emptied, as if the echoes who had walked before were no longer guiding, as if they were watching from somewhere else. The inspector, the widow, the priest, the people of Escada, all remained behind, standing in silent agony as the 3 chosen figures crossed beyond the edge of the city. Íria walked in front. The old woman walked at her side. The magistrate trailed behind them, dragging his feet like a man walking toward his own confession. The city shrank behind them. The fields opened. The wind grew colder with every step. The magistrate broke the silence first. I need to know," he stammered. "If it chooses me, what happens?" Íria didn't stop walking. "You'll see it," she said, "and then you will carry it." His breath shook. "Carry what?" "The truth of it." He rubbed his trembling hands together. "And will it hurt me?" "Yes," Íria said simply, "but not the way Tanako hurt others. Not the kind that breaks bones. The kind that breaks illusions." He swallowed hard. "And if it doesn't choose me?" Íria stepped slowed. "Then you walk back a free man," she said softly. The old woman grunted. "Freedom takes many forms," she murmured. "Some come late. Some come heavy. Some come shaped like a second chance you don't deserve." The magistrate bowed his head. "I deserve none." The old woman nodded. "That's what makes your offer real." The wind picked up, cold and unnatural, like something breathing through the cane fields. Íria stopped. The magistrate bumped into the old woman. "What is it?" he asked frantically. Íria lifted her face. The land changed. The magistrate looked around nervously. "It looks the same." "No," Íria whispered. "It smells awake." The old woman closed her eyes and inhaled deeply. "Yes," she hissed, the ground shivering. A tremor rippled under their feet, soft but steady. Not an earthquake, a heartbeat. The magistrate's knees buckled. It's already sensing us, Íria said. A sound drifted through the fields. Not wind, not insects. A voice. Not one voice. A chorus of whispers, layered and indistinguishable, like dozens of mouths speaking from deep underground. The magistrate panicked. What is it saying? Íria tilted her head, listening. It's not talking to us, she said. It's talking to itself. Another tremor. The old woman spat on the ground. Hungry. The magistrate whimpered. I can't do this. You can, Íria said, but you don't have to. Not yet. He clung to her words like a drowning man to driftwood. They walked further. As the sun dipped behind dark clouds, the estate silhouette rose from the horizon, skeletal, looming, hunched like a dying beast sinking into the earth. The fields around it looked wrong. Plants leaned away from it. Birds circled it in wide arcs. Even the air thickened, like stepping into a different century. The magistrate's voice shook violently. Do you feel that? The air, it's heavy. It's watching who's coming, Íria said. The old woman gripped her staff. Let it watch, she muttered. Another tremor. Closer now. Íria motioned them to stop. From here, she whispered, every step matters. The magistrate nodded, trembling so hard his teeth clicked. Íria took the first step. It echoed, not on the ground, in the air, as if the land itself recorded the sound. She took another step, another echo. Then the old woman stepped beside her. A third echo. The magistrate hesitated, then stepped. The echo that followed was deeper, like the earth recognized him. He gasped. What was that? Íria didn't answer, because she was staring at the house, at the balcony where Tonico had died, where his chest had been carved, where the pit lay behind the house, where the well, the real well, waited. But this state looked different now, darker, older, as if the years peeled back and revealed the rot beneath. The balcony sagged. The windows were black. The door hung half open, swaying slightly without wind. The magistrate covered his mouth. Sweet Jesus. Íria whispered, don't call him here. This place hasn't belonged to him for a long time. The old woman smirked. Truth. They continued walking. As they neared the yard, Íria slowed. The pit, now covered with cloth and guarded by stones, pulsed faintly, not visually, energetically, like a wound waking up. The old woman spoke a prayer in Yoruba, low and steady, drawing protective circles with her thumb. The magistrate fell to his knees. I can't do this. This is madness. This place is cursed. It should be burned. No fire touches what lives beneath, Íria said. He sobbed. Then what do we do? Íria pointed to the back of the house, to the well. The magistrate froze. No, not there. I wrote the reports. I saw what Tonico hid. I never went near it. That's why I called you, Íria said. The old woman stepped ahead. Come. The magistrate didn't move. The old woman turned around. Levanta hamem. You said you wanted to be chosen. Now walk. He forced himself to his feet, swaying. Íria led them through the house. Inside, everything felt wrong. The air was cold, the shadows too long. The floorboards creaked under a weight heavier than footsteps. As they passed the secret room, the magistrate gagged. Íria whispered, don't look. He didn't. They stepped into the back courtyard. And there it was, the well. Stone, cracked, covered with a wooden lid. Rope still hanging from the beam above it. The magistrate collapsed again. The old woman knelt beside him. It won't kill you, she said gently. It doesn't want death. It wants recognition. He shook violently. Why? Why me? Why her? Íria stepped closer to the well. When you signed the first paper, you opened its mouth, she said. And when Tonico fed it fear, you looked away. Her voice softened. It remembers that. He sobbed uncontrollably. Íria placed her palm on the wooden lid of the well. The moment she touched it, the ground shuddered. A deep, Low moan echoed from the well's throat, a vibration that rattled the stones and made dust fall from the beams. The old woman clutched her staff tighter. "It's waking," she said. Íria closed her eyes. "It's listening." The magistrate hid his face in his hands. "I don't want to see it." Íria turned toward him. "Then it won't choose you." He froze. "But if you stand and look, even if you're terrified, then it will know you're ready." "For what?" he whispered. Íria whispered back, "For the truth beneath everything." He swallowed, hard. Then, trembling, he stood. Íria nodded. "Good." She lifted the wooden lid. The well exhaled, a cold so ancient, so unnatural, so hungry spilled out that the magistrate screamed. But Íria didn't scream. She leaned forward, looked, listened. For a moment, she almost fell in. The old woman grabbed her arm. Then Íria's eyes widened. Her breath vanished. Her voice dropped into something too old for childhood. "I see it." The magistrate sobbed. "What do you see?" Íria whispered. "A face made of nothing." The old woman whispered, "Are with grave guard us." Íria continued, "It's waiting." "Waiting for who?" the magistrate begged. Íria turned her head slowly and stared directly at him. The magistrate froze. The old woman held her breath. The air solidified. Then Íria said, "It wants you." The magistrate's scream tore through the night. The magistrate's scream didn't echo the way normal sound echoes. It went down, not out. It dropped into the well like a stone, pulled into that throat of darkness, swallowed by something that had been waiting decades for a voice like his. He staggered backward, tripped, fell onto the dirt, clawed the ground as if he could dig himself away from what he had just felt. "No, no, no, take it back." Íria didn't move. Her hand still rested on the stone edge of the well, fingers pale, knuckles tense. The old woman held her other arm, eyes fixed on the magistrate. "Breathe," the old woman ordered. He couldn't. His chest convulsed, his throat locked, his eyes bulged, staring at something only he could see. Not the well, not the house, not the fields. Something behind his eyelids. "Make it stop," he sobbed. "My God, make it stop." Íria stepped closer. Her voice came out low, controlled. "It already started. You can't unsee it." He shook his head violently. "I don't want to see." "Then why did you come?" she asked. The question hit him harder than any blow. He froze. Memories tumbled through his skull. Coins changing hands. Papers being stamped. Mothers crying outside his office door. His own face in the mirror saying, "You're only doing your job." He had spent decades avoiding exactly this, being forced to see. And here at the edge of the well, he finally understood that this was the only thing the darkness required of him. Not blood, not worship, witness. The old woman knelt beside him and grabbed his chin with surprising strength, forcing his eyes toward her. "Listen to me," she said, voice sharp. "Right now it's showing you what it is. If you run, it will chase you inside your head until you die. If you face it, it will let you leave." He panted, shaking. I can't. "Yes, you can," she snapped. "You live your whole life turning away. For once, don't turn." Íria spoke without looking at him. "What is it showing you?" He gagged. Words came out in pieces. A mouth, but not a mouth, like empty space that wants to pull everything in. His hands clawed at his own chest. And eyes, but the eyes they're not eyes, they're places where light goes to die. The old woman muttered something in Yoruba under her breath. "Joe. It is where sorrow burns." The magistrate squeezed his eyes shut. I see people. I see them falling in one by one. He's pushing them, Tonico." His voice cracked into a sob. He's laughing, he's drunk. He's calling them payment. He's saying the land demands payment. Íria's jaw tightened. "What else?" she asked. "I see," he choked. "I see myself standing far away, turning around, walking back to the house, closing my window, covering my ears, telling myself I can't do anything." His hands flew to his ears as if trying to block the sound. "They're screaming my name," he sobbed. Not his, mine. Tears streamed down his face. I told myself if I didn't look, I wasn't guilty. He looked up, eyes wild, but it saw me look away. Íria's voice softened, but did not pity. Yes. He collapsed again, fingers digging into the dirt. So it carries me, he sobbed. It's been carrying my face with it, in that dark, all these years. The wind shifted, the air thickened. The old woman pressed her palm to the ground. It's listening, she whispered. Then let it hear, Íria said. She crouched in front of the magistrate. Look at me. He did, barely, through tears like a child expecting punishment. What does it want now? She asked. His lips trembled. It wants me to say it. Say what? Íria pressed. He shook. The truth. The old woman nodded slowly. Say it then. His voice was almost gone, rasped raw from screaming and sobbing. But the words came anyway. I knew, he whispered. Nobody answered. He said it again, louder. I knew. His body shivered violently. I knew people were disappearing. I knew he was lying. I knew no man has that many runaways. I knew the ground behind that house wasn't just ground. He choked on his own breath. I knew, and I chose my salary, my status, my quiet evenings, my cowardice. He dragged his fingernails across the soil, furious with himself. I let him feed it. He looked at Íria, and it remembers my silence more than his laughter. The well groaned, not loudly, a deep, subterranean sound, like rocks grinding under centuries. The old woman stiffened. It's moving, she hissed. Íria stepped closer to the well. Her voice dropped to a tone that felt like it belonged to someone far older than 12. You heard him, she said. She wasn't talking to the magistrate. You heard what he carried, she continued. You watched him turn away, again and again, and now he sees you back. The air grew colder. The magistrate shivered. It's eyes, he whispered. They're on me. Íria didn't look down. You called him. You showed him. You made him come. Her jaw tightened. Now let him go. A tremor shot up from the well, strong enough to rattle the stones, to jolt their knees. The magistrate cried out, clutching his chest. It's inside me. No, Íria said firmly. It's leaving you. He gasped. Something in his breathing shifted, still ragged, but less hunted. He blinked rapidly, looking around as if surfacing from deep water. The old woman placed her hand on his back. Can you still see it? She asked. He closed his eyes. Open them. No, he breathed. I can feel where it was, but I can't see it anymore. She nodded. Good. Now we know it can let go. Íria stepped back from the well. Her hand left the stone. The air lightened slightly, barely, like a room where someone had opened a narrow window. The magistrate wiped his face with both hands. Is it satisfied? He asked. Not yet, Íria said. His heart dropped. Then what else does it want? Her gaze turned inward, as if listening again. It wants one more thing, she said softly. The old woman braced herself on her staff, which is... Íria turned around slowly and looked at the two of them. Her eyes were shining, not just with tears, but with reflected darkness. It wants us, she said. The magistrate froze. The old woman tightened her grip. Us how? She asked carefully. To do what no one ever did, Íria replied. Look and not feed. The magistrate shook his head. I don't understand. Yes, you do, Íria said gently. You saw it. You felt its hunger. You felt what it wants. Fear, despair, cruelty, complicity. She stepped closer to him. All your life, you were afraid of losing comfort, afraid of losing status, afraid of being on the other side of power. So you fed the thing every time you chose your safety over someone else's scream. He flinched. She turned to the old woman. And you felt it too, in the nights of the Senzala. In the times you watched someone taken and couldn't stop it, it fed on your helplessness. The old woman nodded slowly. Yes, she said. I felt something sitting in the dark, eating what we couldn't hold. Íria inhaled shakily. It wants us to look at it now without giving it that. The magistrate frowned. Without giving it fear? How? By seeing it for what it is. Íria said, not a god, not a devil, not a destiny, just hunger that people chose to feed. She stepped back toward the well. The old woman stepped with her. The magistrate hesitated. I don't know if I can. You already did, Íria said without turning. Now you have to do it without letting it own you. She leaned over the well again, not as close as before, but close enough to feel the cold. Look, she whispered. The old woman came to her side. Emotai wa ori, she murmured in Yoruba. I've seen you. The magistrate trembled. Then, shaking from head to toe, he forced himself to stand at the edge beside them. He didn't look away. This time, when the cold rose up, when the emptiness pushed against his chest, when that formless hunger pressed against his mind, he didn't scream. He shook. He cried. But he didn't turn. I know you now, he whispered. You're not destiny. You're not fate. You're just what we allowed. The old woman added, You're not stronger than our dead. Íria's voice joined them, steady. You're not stronger than truth. The well groaned again, but softer, like something shifting deeper down. The pressure in the air loosened. The cold receded not completely, but enough to make breathing possible again. Íria closed her eyes. It's pulling back, she said. The magistrate almost collapsed from relief. So is it over? No, Íria said. But now it knows this. We see it, and we won't feed it again. The old woman nodded. Next time men like Tanako come, they won't have a well to hide behind. The magistrate stared at the stones. Will it sleep? He asked. Íria listened. The wind shifted. The tremor beneath their feet quieted. The whispers faded into a distant hum. Not fully, she said, but less awake. And us? The old woman asked. Íria looked at them both. You'll carry it, she said. The magistrate paled. You just said it was leaving me. It left its mark, Íria replied. The difference is, now you know what it is. You won't mistake it for law or order or just doing your job ever again. He sobbed quietly. And you? The old woman asked Íria. Íria looked back down the well one last time. I'll hear it, she said, but it won't own me. The old woman placed her hand over Íria's. Because you didn't love it, she said softly. Íria nodded. I only loved them. She pointed toward the pit behind the house. The bones, the whispers, the echoes, the dead. A long, heavy silence followed, not empty, not peace, but something like a pause between heartbeats. Finally, Íria stepped away from the well. She didn't look back. Let's go. The magistrate hesitated. No offering? No ritual? No sealing prayer? Íria shook her head. The ritual already happened, she said, the day the city knelt. The old woman smiled faintly. Now we just have to live like we meant it. They walked back through the house. The shadows still clung to the walls, but they no longer felt like teeth. The secret room still smelled of despair, but it no longer felt like a living throat. The balcony still overlooked the open ground, but the air was lighter, still haunted, but not held, at the edge of the estate. Just before stepping back onto the road toward Escada, the magistrate stopped. He turned around one last time. Will it ever be gone? He asked. Íria answered without turning. No, his shoulders sagged. But, she added, it can be surrounded by what? He asked. She looked at the horizon. By people who refuse to feed it. The old woman tapped her staff on the ground. Come on, Hamem, she said. We have a city to return to, and a story to tell that won't be written in the Empire's handwriting this time. They stepped onto the road. Behind them, the estate stood quiet. The well slept with one eye open, and in the distance, the people of Escada waited, not knowing yet that the thing beneath the well had been seen, and that from that day on, anyone who tried to build a new Tanako would have to do so in a land that finally knew when the three figures finally stepped out of the state grounds, The air changed again, but this time, the change did not come from the well. It came from the living, from Escada itself. The inspector was the first to spot them, far down the road. His breath caught, his heart clenched. He wasn't sure if they would return at all, or what shape they would return in. The widow, standing at the front of the gathered crowd, pressed both hands against her mouth. Children tugged at their mother's skirts. Old men who had lived through droughts, plagues, and the fall of fortunes suddenly felt tears prick their eyelids. "They're coming," someone whispered. But no one moved. No one dared run to meet them. There was something sacred in the pace of their return, not triumphant, not defeated, just steady, as if each of them carried a part of something heavy and invisible. The magistrate walked strangely, upright, but trembling, lighter, but infinitely older. The old woman walked with her staff grounded deep into the earth at every step, as if ensuring the land remained closed where it needed to stay closed. And Íria walked as though the road itself were responding to her footfalls, not bowing, listening. When the three reached the outskirts of Escada, the inspector stepped forward, voice shaking. "Are you hurt? Is anyone hurt?" Íria shook her head. "No." The magistrate added, voice fragile. "Not in the way you think." The priest stepped forward next, gripping his cross tightly. Did you banish it?" he asked desperately. Íria regarded him with an expression so gentle it hurt. "No," she said. "Nothing that old could be banished." A ripple of fear swept through the crowd. The priest's voice cracked. "Then what did you do?" Íria answered, "We stopped feeding it." The old woman nodded. "And we looked straight at it," she added, with eyes that didn't tremble the way it wanted. The priest blinked rapidly. "You saw it?" The magistrate swallowed hard. "Yes." Silence fell like a blanket. A boy whispered, "Was it a demon?" The magistrate tried to answer. His voice broke. Íria stepped in. "No, demons need faith. This thing needed only silence." Several people winced at the truth of that. The widow stepped forward then, eyes shining with a mix of terror and awe. "What did it do to you?" she asked Íria. Íria did not answer immediately. She looked at the crowd, at the faces, at the trembling hands, at the families who had buried grief so deeply that they forgot where their tears began. And then she looked at the magistrate. His hand still shook. His breath was still uneven. But there was something new in his posture, something small, fragile, but real. Humility. He nodded to her, silently giving permission. Íria turned back to the crowd. "It showed him everything he turned away from," she said softly. "It made him see what his silence fed." Gasps, cries. A few muttered, "Bame Fido." Others murmured prayers. The magistrate did not flinch. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He didn't defend himself. He simply bowed his head to the people he had once judged from behind a desk. A woman stepped forward, a woman who had lost 2 sons to disappearances. She approached him slowly, eyes filled with molten rage. The inspector tensed. She stared at the magistrate for a long moment. He lifted his eyes to hers, accepting whatever blow would come. But she didn't hit him. She placed her trembling hand over her chest and said, "Then carry it." Her voice cracked. "Carry what you saw. Carry what my boys never got to speak. Carry what the papers erased." Every word struck him like a stone. He nodded, tears spilling freely. "I will," he whispered. The crowd murmured, shaken. The inspector swallowed hard, then turned to Íria. "And you?" he asked. "What did it show you?" Íria did not look at him. She looked past him, toward the church tower, toward the square where the city had knelt, toward the place where grief had cracked open and memory poured out like a river. "It showed me why it woke," Íria said quietly. Everyone leaned in. "Why?" the widow asked. Íria's eyes glimmered with something deep, ancient, and unbearably sad. "Because the dead weren't the only ones buried." The inspector frowned. "What do you mean?" Íria stepped forward. The crowd parted instinctively. "The well fed on more than bodies," she said. "It fed on silence, on fear, on everything this land chose not to say, on every lie the empire stamped on paper. on every truth that people swallowed so their families could survive. Her small voice carried across the square like a bell. You fed it every time you said nothing. Her words hit like thunder. Men bowed their heads. Women covered their faces. Some cried openly. Others shook. Even the priest's knees trembled. Íria continued. And when the dead rose, their truth pushed against everything that had been swallowed. The fear spilled out, and that spilled fear woke it. The inspector whispered. So this wasn't about Tanaco alone. Íria nodded. No, he awakened it more than others, but the hunger beneath this land is older than him. The old woman struck the ground with her staff. It's as old as the first scream no one answered. The widow wept silently. People gathered closer, but no one dared touch Íria. Not out of fear, out of reverence. A fisherman asked, "Is it asleep now?" Íria shook her head. It doesn't sleep. It waits. A woman clutched her child tighter. Waits for what? Íria looked at the child, then at the crowd. For us, she said. A suffocating silence followed. Us how? The inspector whispered. Íria's eyes softened. For us not to forget. The old woman nodded. She's right. Íria continued. The dead rested because you said their names, because you carried their memories, because you knelt. Her voice grew thinner, but stronger. But if you go back to silence, if you let fear rule again, if you let men like Tanaco rise again, she pointed toward the horizon, toward the estate. It will wake fully. The magistrate trembled at the thought. The widow whispered, voice breaking, Entel okay phase Mose. Íria looked at them all, the entire city, the entire weight of its history rising and trembling before her. You live differently, Íria said. You tell the stories. You protect those who scream. You don't close your windows when someone cries at night. Her voice rose, not loud, but sharp, clean, cutting. You refuse the silence that fed it. The crowd felt the shift ripple through them, a collective breath, heavy with realization. The priest stepped forward, placing a hand over his heart. And if we fail, he whispered. Íria met his gaze. Then it wakes again, she said. The old woman tapped her staff once more, this time not in warning, but in affirmation. It's on all of us now, she said. The inspector bowed his head. The widow wiped her cheeks. The magistrate breathed shakily, as if learning to inhale for the first time. And one by one, the people of Escada did something they hadn't done since the day the dead rose. They knelt, not out of fear, not out of guilt, out of promise. Íria watched them, and for the first time since the dark thing opened its eyes, she allowed herself to exhale, because now it wasn't just her carrying it. If the story ended there, with a city on its knees and a well half asleep, Talvez Foss Mays Simples de Cedar. But history doesn't end when people stand up and go home. It ends much, much later. Or maybe it never really ends. In the weeks after that day in 1880, Escada changed in ways that were loud and visible, and in ways so quiet that only the soil noticed. Some changes you could see. The Albuquerque estate was never lived in again. The widow left the house and moved into a small home near the edge of town. People expected her to vanish into shame or denial, but she did neither. Every Thursday, she went to the old chapel and lit candles, not for her husband, but for the ones he buried. And whenever someone whispered, "She must have known," she answered simply, "I know now, and I won't unknow it." The magistrate resigned. No one forced him. He walked into his own office, placed the imperial seal on the desk, and said, "Let someone else carry ink if they still want to pretend it's clean." He never held a position of power again. Instead, he spent his days doing something far more dangerous to the comfortable. He listened. Mothers came to him with stories. Old men came with names. He wrote them down, not on government paper, but in a cheap notebook he kept hidden inside his shirt. When people asked what he was doing, he said, "I am making sure the dark has fewer places to hide." The priest changed his sermons. He still wore the same cassock. He still raised the same cross. But now, When he spoke about sin, he didn't spend his words on small vices, gossip, laziness, drinking. He spoke about silence. He stood on the pulpit and said, "If your faith doesn't make you get up when someone is screaming, it's not faith, it's decoration." Some parishioners left his church. Others, quietly, knelt with a different kind of sincerity. The inspector left. Eventually, he accepted a transfer to another province, far from Pernambuco. Some said it was fear. Some said it was shame. But those who knew him well said this: he couldn't walk past a closed door without wondering what cry he wasn't hearing. And Íria, let's talk about her. Because if you search the official records of Escada, Pernambuco, 1880, you might never find her name. You'll find mentions of a disturbance, maybe a collective agitation, a case of mass hysteria following the death of a sugar baron. You might even find some priestly notes blaming pagan superstition and exaggerated grief. But a 12-year-old girl who made an entire city kneel, that part, the paper doesn't like to keep. So her story traveled where paper couldn't erase it, through mouths, through nights, through songs whispered in the back of kitchens and in the quiet of laundry yards, through stories told to children when the lights were out and the only thing between them and the dark was a voice they trusted. Some called her the girl who heard the fallen. Others called her the guardian of the well. Some swore that after that year, whenever someone tried to build anything near the old estate without asking permission from the community, strange things happened. Tools broke, carts overturned. Men woke up with dreams of falling endlessly into a mouth that had no teeth, no tongue, just emptiness. Was it true? Maybe. Or maybe it was the land's way of making sure people remembered what slept beneath it. As Íria grew, people expected her to become something recognizable. A healer, a seer, a saint, a witch. She became none of those. She became a woman who listened. People came to her not just for visions, but for truth they were afraid to say out loud. My boss beats me and says I should be grateful I'm not in chains. My son disappeared in another town. The authorities say it's nothing. My husband joined the police and says it's not his problem who they're told to hit. Íria didn't offer magic solutions. She asked one question over and over: who benefits from your silence? If you think that question belongs only to 1880, I'm going to ask you now, wherever you are, whatever year you're in, to let it land near your own ribs for a second. Who benefits from your silence? Breathe and don't answer too rapido. Let it scratch a little first. Years later, when slavery was finally abolished on paper in 1888, some people in Escada threw small celebrations. Others shrugged. Nothing really changes, they said. They'll just find another name for the same chains. But there was one difference in that town. When someone tried to justify cruelty with law or with profit or with tradition, there were always a few eyes that narrowed. There were people who had kneeled that day in the square, people who had felt the hum of the dead beneath their feet, who would whisper, "Careful, we know where this road leads. We know what waits at the end of it." Parents told their children, "Don't play near the old Albuquerque lands." Not because of ghosts, because of memory. The thing beneath the well, it stayed. Hunger doesn't evaporate, but it lived differently now. Not as a god secretly fed by one man's cruelty, but as a warning carved into the land. This is what happens when fear and silence hold hands for too long. And here's something you need to hold in your own hands right now. In Quanto Aviso, what woke that hunger was never magic. It was never African superstition. It was never a colonial curse. It was choices. 1,000 small choices made by people who said, "It's not my business. I can't risk everything. I'm just following orders. I'd rather not know. I have a family to protect. I don't want trouble. Now I want to bring you gently, but sem fugir para perto dessa pergunta." If that well existed today, if that thing that feeds on fear and silence were buried under your city, under your condo, under your job, under your scroll of social media, would it be starving or would it be full? Don't answer rapido. Just notice the feeling in your chest when I ask. Because what haunted Pernambuco in 1880 isn't just a local legend. It's not Brazilian horror. It's not only about sugarcane and chains. It's about what every society does with its own cruelty, burial, forgetfulness, decoration, and sometimes a girl like Íria, someone that the world expected to stay quiet, and she decides to listen to what everyone else pretended not to hear. And because of that, a whole city has to kneel, not to her, to the truth. You might be tempted to think, nice story, strong girl, terrible past, ainda bem que isso fica lá atrás. But I want you to stay comigo mais palco, because the story of Íria is not a museum piece. It's a mirror. And before we close this story, I need to tilt that mirror devagar until he points direct. Before I continue, I need you to do one thing. Not for Íria, not for the past. For you, take a slow breath. Really, right now. Because what I'm about to say isn't about Pernambuco anymore. It isn't about 1880. It isn't about Tonico or the Empire or that curse well behind an abandoned house. It's about the world you live in today. Walk with me a little further, slowly, until we reach where the story has been trying to lead you. You see, every country has its own, well, some bury it under monuments, some under polite history books, some under patriotic pride, some under the comfortable belief that that was a long time ago. But here's the truth. The past does not stay buried just because the living stop looking. A piece of it always breathes. Sometimes quietly, sometimes loudly, sometimes through a 12-year-old girl who refuses to bend her neck when the world tells her she was born to obey. And now I have to ask you something, and don't escape from it. What was the last thing you pretended not to see? Maybe it wasn't a scream in the night. Maybe it wasn't a disappearing body. Maybe it wasn't chains or a pit. But maybe a humiliation you watched and shrugged off. A child being mistreated on the street. A racist comment you ignored because you didn't want conflict. A moment of violence that you hoped someone else would deal with. A cruelty you excused because the victim wasn't your problem. Take another slow breath. Don't look away from yourself now. Because Tonico did not wake the thing beneath the well by himself. He only fed what the rest of the world pretended not to smell. And before you say, that's in the past, let me ask you another question. What do you feed with your silence today? Listen, not with your ears, but with that sore, tender place inside you that always knows when something is wrong. We all have moments when staying quiet feels safer, when speaking up feels too risky, when we think, it's not my business. Someone else will fight this. I don't want trouble. This doesn't affect me. And that tiny retreat, that tiny surrender, that tiny, comfortable silence is how wells are born. You don't have to dig them. They open on their own when fear makes the ground collapse. Here's the part you may not want to hear. Every time someone chooses not to see, something wakes up. Not a ghost, not a demon, something worse. Repetition, the cycle, the pattern, the quiet return of everything we swore we'd never allow again. Your city may not kneel in the dirt like Escada did. Your country may not hear the whispers of bones. Your time may not have a girl like Íria standing between the living and the forgotten. But the test is the same. Every generation is handed a single choice. Feed the darkness. Or face it. You don't need to be brave to face it. You don't need visions. You don't need wisdom older than the land. Íria teaches us something simpler. Facing darkness does not require strength. It requires honesty. Fear doesn't feed the well. Cowardice does. Indifference does. Convenience does. The desire to stay comfortable while someone else bleeds does. Let me ask you one last question. Answer it only to yourself. If you were standing in that square and Íria looked into your eyes and said, "Speak the truth you've been hiding," what would come out of your mouth? Your guilt? Your silence? Your fear of choosing sides? The lie you let lie because the truth was too heavy? The prejudice you kept tucked inside your ribs because nobody challenged it? Or maybe you would say something else. I won't feed it anymore. Because here's the deepest truth in this entire story. The well only wakes when the city forgets. And it sleeps when someone finally chooses to remember. Sometimes that someone is a child. Sometimes it's an old woman who's seen too much. Sometimes it's a man broken by his own cowardice. Sometimes it's an entire community that decides enough is enough. But most of the time, almost always, it starts with one person, in one moment, making one choice. You, as you listen to this right now, there is something in your life, something real, something present, that has been calling you to speak. You know exactly what it is. You felt it just now. Don't pretend you didn't, because the well beneath Escada, that ancient hunger, isn't a horror story to entertain you. It's a metaphor to wake you. The darkness in the world is fed by the darkness inside us. And the people who break the cycle are not the strongest, or the smartest, or the loudest. They're the ones who decide to look, even while trembling. I'll leave you with this. If silence fed the darkness, then your voice is light. You walked a long way with me, through the cane fields, through the whispers, through the well beneath the earth, through a city that had to kneel to finally learn how to stand. Now we're at the end. And before you go, I need you to hear this, not as a story, but as a warning, a compass, a promise, because the truth is simple. What happened in Pernambuco in 1880 was not an ending. It was inherited, not in blood, not in curses, but in memory. Every generation receives a piece of that night, the night when the living carried the weight of the dead, and the dead pushed the living to remember who they were. Íria didn't defeat the darkness beneath the well. She didn't seal it, kill it, or cage it. She did something far more dangerous. She understood it. She understood that evil doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it hides in paperwork. Sometimes it sits behind a desk. Sometimes it wears a uniform. Sometimes it smiles. And most of the time, its favorite place to sleep is inside the silence of people who believe they're not part of it. The well didn't hunger for blood. It hungered for forgetfulness, for the comfort of those who look away, for the safety of those who say, "This doesn't concern me," for the quiet nods of those who benefit from someone else's suffering. And that's why Íria's story survived, because it stopped being a story. It became a mirror, not the kind that flatters, the kind that reveals, a mirror that asks, what shadows grow behind your silence? Who pays the price for what you choose not to see? What darkness becomes stronger every time you swallow the truth? You can pretend not to know the answers. Most people do, but the well, it always knows, because darkness isn't creature, it's a consequence. And here's the part most people forget. The opposite of darkness isn't light, it's responsibility. Light means nothing if no one holds it. Light means nothing if no one carries it to the places where people are hurting. Light means nothing if you turn it off when things get uncomfortable. Responsibility, the courage to speak, the courage to listen, the courage to act. That's what starves the well. Not miracles, not saints, not wishes, just people. People who say, I won't pretend this isn't happening. I won't let fear make decisions for me. I won't let someone else suffer for my comfort. People like Íria and people like you, if you choose to be. Because yes, this is a story about the past, about slavery, about buried screams, about a girl who heard what others refuse to hear. But it's also about now, right now, as you sit wherever you are, phone in hand, headphones in, the world moving around you. You're holding a truth the people of Escada didn't have. You know exactly how silence grows monsters. You've seen it in the news, in your neighborhood, in your workplace, in your family, in your country. And now you've seen it in a well from 1880 that should have been forgotten, but never was. So let me leave you with what Íria left for the people of her time and for us. A sentence, born from a child who carried centuries in her ribs. The darkness sleeps only when the living refuse to feed it. Remember that. Write it somewhere. Whisper it when you're afraid. Repeat it when the world tries to numb you. Carry it the way the magistrate carried his guilt, not as punishment, but as purpose, because the well may still exist, not in Pernambuco, not in a field, not under an old house, but inside human choices, Inside silence. Inside the comfortable lie that says, if I don't look, nothing wakes. You know better now. You've walked too close to the edge. You've heard what hunger sounds like. So wherever you live, whatever city, whatever century, never forget this final truth. Every time you speak, something dark goes back to sleep. Every time you stay silent, something dark opens its eyes. And in case no one ever told you, your voice still matters. More than you think, more than you'll ever know. This story began in 1880, but it ends right here, with you.